Part 60. The Prince Longs for Me Every Night After Mastering Thought Reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 591. Even Su Qingqing beside him looked at Jun Wuxian with curiosity. She also wanted to confirm his identity as soon as possible, and she hoped that Shen Shuwei was Feng Wu. They had a good relationship, and they were aunt sister-in-law. Jun Wuxian didn't have to look for his sister everywhere. Jun Wuxian looked at the two expectant eyes in front of him, and he coughed lightly. My way is to go find my father, he knows. Shen Shuwei thought Jun Wuxian had a way, but he ended up finding his father. She was not disappointed, but a little surprised. Who is your father? So powerful. Jun Wuxian said, the national master of Nanzhao. Shen Shuwei just picked up the teacup and took a sip of water, but it all sprayed out. She hurriedly took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth, looking at Jun Wuxian in disbelief. Is your father the national master? Jun Wuxian nodded. Yeah, what's wrong? Shen Shuwei continued to wipe her mouth to hide her embarrassment, thinking, I didn't realize that the national master actually had a son. She secretly glanced at Jun Wuxian, who seemed not much younger than the national master. He was really handsome, but he didn't seem to have completely inherited the national master's handsome and extraordinary temperament. However, there was not much difference between her saying that she was pretending to be Feng Wu in front of him and saying it in front of the national master. Su Qingqing looked at Shen Shuwei worriedly. Wai Wei, what's wrong with you? Shen Shuwei smiled at Su Qingqing. I'm fine. She glanced at Jun Wuxian, and didn't expect that he was the son of the national master. Jun Wuxian saw her reaction and felt that there must be something he didn't know. He guessed, have you met my father? Shen Shuwei nodded awkwardly, I have met him. Not only that, she also called the national master dad. Jun Wuxian saw that he guessed correctly, and continued, since you have met him, if you are not, my father can recognize you. The national master did say that he would not make a mistake, but Shen Shuwei was a little entangled. Should she tell about her time travel? But what? Even my father said you are, so it can't be false. You are Feng Wu. Jun Wuxian said it with absolute certainty. His father would never admit his mistake. Shen Shuwei took a sip of tea, raised her head and looked at Jun Wuxian. Seeing that he was staring at her, she took 2 more sips of tea, as if she had made up her mind. Then you know that Shen Shuwei's personality was not like this before. Qingqing knows it. When Shen Shuwei mentioned it, Su Qingqing immediately nodded in agreement. Wai Wei was indeed not like this before. I told you that Wai Wei's personality was a little scheming but a little weak before. She was bullied badly in the Shen family, and after entering the palace, she fought hard for favor. By the way, she used to be afraid of cats, and was scared to tears by Sichuan. Su Qingqing said and looked at Shen Shuwei again, with a puzzled look on her face. I'm very curious, you have changed since you fell into the water and became seriously ill. I thought you were pretending at first, and wanted to indulge in lust. Shen Shuwei didn't rush to answer Su Qingqing's question, but looked at Jun Wuxian. Do you think Shen Shuwei and Feng Wu are similar? Shen Shuwei had heard too much about Feng Wu. If the original owner was Feng Wu, at least their personality and temperament would be similar. Not only are they not similar, but they are also completely different. Jun Wuxian was stunned when he heard this. He did hear Su Qingqing mention it. Xiaju is not weak. Although she is lazy, it doesn't mean she will be bullied. She is a little smart and has the ability to protect herself. Jun Wuxian paused here and asked Su Qingqing the same question. Then why did you suddenly change your personality? Sichuan is very close to you and listens to you. Well. Shen Shuwei picked up the teacup and drank 2 more sips of tea. Looking at the 2 people opposite who were staring at her, she brooded for a while. I'm not the original owner. The original owner died of illness after falling into the water 5 years ago. You understand? After Shen Shuwei finished speaking, she looked at them again. Such a simple thing should be easy to understand, right? Su Qingqing widened her eyes in shock. She grabbed Shen Shuwei's hand and was so excited. So you are reincarnating? I said, why did your personality change so much? It turns out that you changed your soul. Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, that's what I mean, and I'm not from here, I don't belong to any country, understand? After listening, Su Qingqing was stunned for a moment, then shook her head, I don't understand, how can you not be from here? Then where did your soul come from? It can't be out of a stone, right? Shen Shuwei. I'm not Sun Wuxian, who jumped out of a stone. Jun Wuxian didn't expect Shen Shuwei to die 5 years ago. Someone reincarnated her. The current Shen Shuwei is no longer the original Shen Shuwei. But now she is very similar to Xiaju in character. Then where are you from? Modern, a future world in another time and space. Shen Shuwei didn't know if they could understand. The reason why she said it was another time and space was because she had never heard of this ancient history. Su Qingqing's brain was not so flexible, and she was confused. I still don't understand. Shen Chu smiled and comforted, it doesn't matter if you don't understand. It's not knowledge that you must understand. Su Qingqing nodded, that's right. Jun Wuxian took a sip of the teacup. In fact, he didn't understand what was going on. The original Shen Shuwei was gone, and the current Shen Shuwei came from another place. No wonder he always thought he was not Feng Wu. Even if the previous Shen Shuwei was still there, that personality had nothing to do with Xiaju. He didn't believe that Xiaju would become a person who would do anything to win favor. She will not be easily bullied. My father once said that you can avoid trouble, but you can't be afraid of trouble and be bullied. By the way, my father is in the palace, why didn't I see him last night? Shen Shuwei said, the state teacher went to do things, and it will take a few days to come back. No wonder I didn't see my father when I returned to the palace, but... Jun Wuxian looked at Shen Shuwei, smiled and said, do you plan to confess to my father and get leniency? Shen Shuwei nodded, yes, although it was not my intention to pretend to be Feng Wu at the beginning, but later it was my idea to confess and get leniency. I hope that the state teacher will be generous and not care about it. Jun Wuxian smiled and continued, I don't think my father will admit his mistake. Shen Shuwei smiled awkwardly, I also hope to have a father like the state teacher, who is handsome and powerful, and full of security. Jun Wuxian couldn't help laughing, ask my father when the time comes. At this time in Wu Palace, Xiao Jinyan came back from outside and brought some pastries and freshly baked cakes. He walked straight into the bedroom and found that there was no one in the bedroom, only Suichuan was lying there sleeping. Xiao Jinyan frowned and turned to walk out. Xiaoju, he called. Ever since Shen Shuwei left without saying goodbye, Xiao Jinyan has had a shadow in his heart. If he doesn't see her, he will be afraid involuntarily. The little palace maid saw Xiao Jinyan coming back from a distance, holding up the hem of her skirt and trotting over. She took 2 breaths, took out the note from her sleeve pocket and handed it to Xiao Jinyan with both hands. Mr. Xiao, this is what the master asked me to give you. Xiao Jinyan had a bad premonition in his heart. He couldn't wait to pick up the note and open it, and saw a very short sentence written on it. Su Qingqing came to Nanzhao Kingdom. I went out of the palace to see her at Yue Inn. After reading the note, Xiao Jinyan was relieved and a little confused about why Su Qingqing came. It's so far from Daxia to the capital city. What is she doing as a woman? The little maid said, Mr. Xiao, the master said she will be back soon. Xiao Jinyan put away the note, took the cakes and biscuits in her hand and turned back to the bedroom. It was already afternoon when Shen Shuwei came back. She came back after lunch. As soon as she came back, the little maid came to greet her, Master, Mr. Xiao is back. I'll go and see. Shen Shuwei walked into the side hall of the bedroom, and saw Xiao Jinyan sitting at the round table, drinking tea. Xiao Jinyan heard the footsteps, so he looked up and saw Shen Shuwei, and he was really relieved. Xiaoju. Su Qingqing and Jun Wuxian are here, Shen Shuwei said, and came to the table to sit down. Xiao Jinyan poured him a cup of tea, and she took it and drank a few sips. Xiao Jinyan knew who Jun Wuxian was when he heard him, and guessed what he was doing in Nanzhao. When he was in Nanzhao, he had seen Jun Wuxian many times. It's just that Jun Wuxian occasionally lived in the palace, and most of the time he was outside. He came to see you, Xiao Jinyan said affirmatively. Shen Shuwei paused while drinking tea. You also know Jun Wuxian? Xiao Jinyan nodded. Yes, I have seen him many times in Nanzhao. Shen Shuwei said. He investigated Shen Shuwei's background and thought I was Feng Wu, but I told him the truth. Xiao Jinyan asked in confusion, what is Shen Shuwei's background? Shen Shuwei explained. Jun Wuxian said that Shen Shuwei was not a concubine's daughter raised in the countryside by the Shen family. The concubine's daughter of the Shen family died at the age of 11, and then a girl about the same age as Shen Shuwei was picked up and raised in her place. Xiao Jinyan nodded thoughtfully. So that's the case. Then he asked again, what else did Jun Wuxian say? He believes that the national teacher will not make a mistake. Shen Shuwei looked at the oil paper bag on the table. From the moment she sat down, she smelled the fragrance and reached out to take the oil paper bag. After opening the oil paper package, she saw the cake. She loved eating crispy cakes, so she couldn't wait to take a piece and put it in her mouth. Although it was not as delicious as the one just out of the pan, it tasted good. Xiao Jinyan watched her eat. What do you think? Shen Shuwei took a bite of the crispy cake and said, I don't know either. Logically speaking, it is unlikely that I am Feng Wu. Wait for the national master to come back and see what the national master says. The reason why the national master was mentioned is because the national master is too powerful. The point is that the national master also has space. She didn't dare to ask before, but now she really wants to ask. Xiao Jinyan and Jun Wuxian both think that the national master will not make a mistake, so they can only wait for the national master to come back. She ate the crispy cake and looked up at the mural above. The portrait of Feng Wu really looks exactly like Shen Shuwei. Maybe the original owner was indeed Feng Wu, and her temperament changed for some reason? There is another chapter. Please give me a monthly ticket for more. Babies, good afternoon. The national master is coming back. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 592. Xiao Jinyan followed Shen Shuwei's line of sight and saw the mural, which was a portrait of Feng Wu when she was a child. He remembered very clearly that on her 8th birthday that year, the national master drew a picture for her, and she even brought it to him to show him. The national master drew it. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan in surprise. How did you know? Xiaoju. Xiao Jinyan paused. She said so. Oh, Shen Shuwei took a bite of the biscuit and looked at the mural again. Xiao Jinyan retracted his gaze and looked at Shen Shuwei, somewhat struggling whether to tell her that Yesuhan was Wu Tan. After thinking about it, he decided not to tell her for the time being. Shen Shuwei took out the drawing board and pen when she was free, held her chin with her hand and thought for a while, and then began to draw the general outline. When Yesuhan came, he saw Shen Shuwei sitting on the arch bridge. He slowed down his footsteps and came behind her, and found that she was drawing, but she was not using a red pen. He lowered his eyes to look at the drawing board, but it was just the outline of a shadow, and he couldn't tell what was being drawn. What are you drawing? Shen Shuwei was absorbed in drawing, and when she heard a familiar voice, she looked up and saw Yesuhan standing behind her, like a devil, with a sinister aura. Drawing a person. Yesuhan lifted the hem of his clothes and sat down on the steps beside her. His eyes swept to the drawing board again, it looks like a shadow, not a person. Shen Shuwei ignored his words and asked, "What are you doing here?" Yasuhan looked at her face, which was as pink and tender as when she was a child, making people unable to help but reach out and pinch it. "Can't I come and see you? Isn't it just 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth? What's so good about it?" Shen Shuwei retracted her gaze and continued to draw. She had to finish the drawing before the national teacher came back. Yasuhan nodded in agreement. "Yes, they all have 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Why do I only like you?" The sudden confession almost sprained her waist. Shen Shuwei turned her head to look at Yasuhan, and as expected, she saw that Yasuhan was looking at her with one hand on his knee and supporting his temple. This time, she didn't feel any hair. "To tell you the truth, I'm not Feng Wu, so don't say such things to me in the future." Yasuhan was stunned for a moment, and suddenly understood why Xiao Jinyan came to him for evidence. "You have a mole on your wrist." Shen Shuwei subconsciously looked down at her wrist. There was indeed a mole there. She knew it the day she came here. Yasuhan actually knew it? Yasuhan said slowly, "There was no mole there originally. I printed it when you were 5 years old." Shen Shuwei felt abnormal. "You didn't print it on purpose, wanting to be a chastity seal?" Yasuhan couldn't help laughing. "That's not the case, because I have one on my hand too." Then he stretched out his hand and rolled up his sleeves to show Shen Shuwei. Shen Shuwei looked at his wrist and saw a mole in the same position, but the difference was that his mole was a little fuller, while hers was flat. This is probably the difference between being born with it and being born later. However, Yasuhan's words can only be half believed. Shen Shuwei poked her chin with a pen and stared at Yasuhan thoughtfully. "So the original owner was Feng Wu?" Seeing that she didn't say anything, Yasuhan asked, "Don't you believe it?" Shen Shuwei snorted, "Why should I believe you?" "Why don't you believe it?" Yasuhan laughed again. "Even Xiao Jinyan came to me for evidence." Shen Shuwei was confused. "What evidence do you want?" Yasuhan said, "Evidence that can prove that you are Feng Wu." Shen Shuwei was stunned when she heard this. She thought Xiao Jinyan was about to dispel the fact that she was Feng Wu, but she didn't expect that he still thought she was Feng Wu and asked Yasuhan for evidence. With Yasuhan's personality, he wouldn't give it. Wait, what did Xiao Jinyan mean by what he said on horseback that night? Didn't you say you have the same feelings for both women? You said both women, and you're still looking for evidence? Yasuhan said dimly, "I have evidence, but I don't want to give it to him." Shen Shuwei. See, she knew Yasuhan wouldn't tell him. "Then why did you come to tell me?" Yasuhan said slowly, "Because I like you and don't like him. If I like you, saying 10 more sentences is not enough, and if I don't like you, saying one more word is too much. In short, I just hate talking to Xiao Jinyan." Shen Shuwei couldn't help rolling her eyes. Yasuhan looked at her with a smile. "I still have evidence, do you want to know?" Shen Shuwei, "If you want to say it, just say it. If you don't want to say it, it's useless for me to say it." Yasuhan nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, you don't want to know." Shen Shuwei. "How boring is this, making fun of her?" She snorted, "Are you better than the Imperial Master?" Yasuhan said, "Of course I'm not as good as Master. Master can tell at a glance, but it took me a long time to get evidence to confirm that you are Xiaju." Shen Shuwei stared at Yasuhan for a long time. At first, she thought he was talking nonsense, but now she was a little curious about what evidence he was talking about. "Do you really have evidence? You are not lying to me, are you?" "Why should I lie to you?" Yasuhan sighed, "I don't have to lie to you." Shen Shuwei said, "Didn't you say that Feng Wu is destined to be the crown princess, and whoever marries her will be the crown prince? You are so anxious to confirm that I am Feng Wu, isn't that your intention?" Yasuhan was stunned when he heard this, and then laughed twice. as if he heard a joke. Shen Shuwei frowned. What are you laughing at? Yesuhan said word by word, I won't marry you because of the position of crown prince, I will only become the crown prince because of marrying you. Shen Shuwei was stunned. Yesuhan saw that she didn't speak and smiled and said, don't you believe it? Shen Shuwei didn't answer but said, I heard that after Feng Wu disappeared, you also disappeared. You haven't returned to the palace for almost 10 years, which shows that you are not ambitious. Be like Xiao Jinyan, who is ambitious and became the crown prince only 3 years after returning to Daxia. Yesuhan said, I promised you that I would make you the queen. You can eat whatever you want without restriction and no one dares to control you. Shen Shuwei couldn't help asking, you said that to a 10-year-old girl. In her eyes, a 10-year-old girl doesn't understand these things. Yesuhan looked at Shen Shuwei, no, 5 years old. Shen Shuwei was petrified on the spot. A 10-year-old boy said this to a 5-year-old kid. It's a little too precocious. A 5-year-old kid probably only heard that you can eat whatever you want, and didn't know what being a queen meant. Yesuhan smiled and looked at her, there is another piece of evidence that is. Shen Shuwei asked, what is it? Yesuhan uttered 2 words lightly, broken moon. Shen Shuwei was stunned when he heard it, broken moon. At this time, Xiao Jinyan strode over from a distance, because he saw Yesuhan sitting next to Shen Shuwei. Xiaoju. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan when she heard the voice. She sat up with the drawing board and greeted him. Yesuhan stood up slowly from the steps, watching Xiao Jinyan walk over and stand beside Shen Shuwei. Xiao Jinyan held Shen Shuwei's hand, and when he looked up at Yesuhan, his eyes were very unfriendly. Third prince, is there something wrong? Yesuhan looked at Xiao Jinyan holding Xiaoju's hand with cold eyes, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He said as a matter of course, Xiaoju and I grew up together, what's wrong with chatting? Xiao Jinyan acted like a host, and his tone was very polite, nothing, the third prince is a guest anyway, I neglected him. Yesuhan sneered, this is the palace of Nanzhao Kingdom, you are the guest. Shen Shuwei smelled a strong smell of gunpowder, fearing that the two would fight if they disagreed, and stretched out his hand to pull Xiao Jinyan's sleeve, I'm hungry. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and glanced at Xiaoju, and saw a pair of sparkling star eyes staring at him without blinking, and the unhappiness just now disappeared. Excuse me, third prince. After Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he took Shen Shuwei's hand and walked towards the side hall. Yesuhan's thin figure stood straight on the arch bridge, looking at the two people walking hand in hand, frowning, wishing he could go up and pull them apart. After Xiao Jinyan took Shen Shuwei into the side hall, he took out the cakes he bought today and put them on the table. Shen Shuwei was really a little hungry. As soon as Xiao Jinyan opened it, she couldn't wait to pick up a piece and put it in her mouth. It melted in her mouth, sweet but not greasy. Xiao Jinyan watched her eat the cake. Just now, he saw Yesuhan smiling so happily, and couldn't help asking, what did you talk about with Yesuhan just now? We talked a little about Feng Wu. He also said that you went to him to ask for evidence, but he didn't want to tell you, but wanted to tell me. Shen Shuwei finished speaking in one breath and took another bite of the cake. Xiao Jinyan asked, did he tell you? Shen Shuwei repeated what Yesuhan said, and did not forget to show him her wrist. Look, there is indeed a mole here. The mole on the wrist is not conspicuous, and it is not visible at all if you don't pay attention. Xiao Jinyan has been sleeping with her for so long and knows this mole, but he didn't notice that she also had a mole when she was a child. Then what is the other evidence? It's Po Yu, Shen Shuwei said, and took out Po Yu from the space to show Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan looked at the dagger that appeared out of thin air, stunned for a moment, and then picked up the dagger and looked at it carefully. This is what I accidentally found in the space. It looks sharp and is also good for self-defense. In the past, quilts and other things were taken out of the space. The space is like a super large storage room that can store a lot of things. Shen Shuwei explained the use of the space by the way. When Xiao Jinyan lost his memory, she said that she would tell him the secret of the space after he remembered. This was the first time Xiao Jinyan heard of the space. No wonder he saw her take things out of thin air before, and said that he would tell him when he remembered later. At this time, Xiao Jinyan no longer cared about the space, but carefully looked at the dagger and found that the complex pattern on it was the broken moon. When he looked at Xiaju, he excitedly grabbed her hand and said, "This is the broken moon, which the national master gave to Fenghui for self-defense. When she was a child, she often used the broken moon to cut cakes and fruits to eat. Now that the broken moon is in your hand, do you still think you are not Fenghui? Please vote for the monthly ticket to climb the list. This is the promise to vote for the monthly ticket to add more chapters." Originally, this chapter was about the return of the National Master. Good night, babies. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 593. Chapter 593. She actually traveled from ancient times to modern times. The Imperial Master is back. He knew that Yesuhan had evidence to prove that she was Fenghui. At the same time, Xiao Jinyan also blamed himself for neglecting this point. When I was with Fenghui, we held hands countless times, but I didn't notice the mole under her wrist. There was also Po Yu. He had seen Shen Shuwei take out a dagger, but he always thought it was an ordinary dagger. He suddenly remembered that when the Miao tribe was promoted, Shen Shuwei also took out a dagger to deal with Yesuhan who tried to kill him, but because of the emergency situation at the time, he did not notice the appearance of the dagger. Yesuhan probably saw Po Yu at that time, so he further confirmed that she was Fenghui. Shen Shuwei looked at the broken moon in Xiao Jinyan's hand. She was so excited when she accidentally discovered that she had a space when she was 10 years old. Having read fantasy novels, she knew that there was a kind of Nai ring that could store items. The space is more advanced than Naja because the space has a refrigerator function that can be kept fresh or frozen. As for this dagger, I found it in space. At that time, I thought it was easier to use than a fruit knife. She raised her head to look at Xiao Jinyan and saw him looking at her with excitement. I don't know either. I just found out that this dagger was given to Fenghui by the Imperial Master. I have been using it for almost 10 years. Use it as a fruit knife. Xiao Jinyan was not surprised that she used Po Yu as a fruit knife. What surprised her was that her mind had not changed. The moon breaks hair, and cuts iron like mud. It is a rare treasure. You told me this. You see, the treasure for self-defense is used as a fruit knife. There is no one else but you. Shen Shuwei didn't say that she had even cut steak with Po Yu, which could be said to be effortless. If I were Fenghui, how could I be in modern times? Could it be that I also traveled through time? Xiao Jinyan said, "You can travel here, why can't you travel from here to modern times?" Although he didn't understand why he could travel through time, since he could travel through it, why couldn't he pass through it? Shen Shuwei was stunned for a moment when he heard the words, and felt that what Xiao Jinyan said made sense. Since he could travel to ancient times, he could also travel to modern times. It's incredible just thinking about it. Xiao Jinyan thought she didn't believe it, so he continued to ask, "When you were in modern times, do you still remember what happened before you were 10 years old?" Shen Chu shook his head slightly. "I don't remember. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The director's mother said that I fell down the stairs and hit my head, so I couldn't remember anything before." Shen Shuwei seemed to be thinking of something when he said this. Most of the time travel plots in romance novels are about falling, car accidents, or waking up in the hospital. Could it be that I wore it to modern times at that time? Xiao Jinyan said, it's very possible, otherwise how could it be such a coincidence? Wouldn't you remember what happened before you were 10 years old? Shen Chu touched his chin slightly, looked at Xiao Jinyan, and asked doubtfully, why did I travel to modern times? Xiao Jinyan's eyes paused. This was what he had been wondering about. Xiao Ju suddenly disappeared back then. The reason why he was said to be missing was because no body was found. It is said that if you are alive, you need to see a person, and if you are dead, you need to see a corpse. If you don't see a corpse, it means you are still alive. But he didn't know any of this. When Xiaju had an accident, he forgot about it after he woke up. Apart from the snowballs around him, there was a painting and a piece of jade. After several days of investigation, it was discovered that after Xiaoju disappeared, the Imperial Master used some method to make everyone in the city forget about Princess Juyu. Since then, the Imperial Master has left the capital city. Shen Chu thought for a while and then said, if I travel to modern times and my soul travels through time, then this body will also be worn by someone? Who could it be? Xiao Jinyan thought of the previous Shen Chuwei, who had deliberately contacted her twice because she looked very similar to the little girl in the portrait. Her temperament was really not lovable at all, but rather disgusting. As for who it was, I couldn't hear her talking about time travel even though I was reading my mind at that time, but she was only thinking about how to win favor and position. There is no way of knowing who it is now. As for why you traveled to modern times, perhaps the Imperial Master will know. Shen Chuwei also felt that the Imperial Master was so powerful that he should know something about it. Then I'll ask the Imperial Master when he comes back. After Shen Chuwei finished speaking, she continued to eat the cake in her hand. Xiao Jinyan looked at the way she was eating. No wonder he liked to watch her eat every time, because he liked watching her before. It felt as if he had eaten it himself, and his mood would get better. He found a drawing board on the table, picked it up and looked at it twice, and found a shadow on it. What are you going to draw? Shen Chu looked at the drawing board in his hand slightly and said while eating pastry, Master Imperial Master and Feng Wu were preparing to draw when Yesuhan came. Shen Chuwei wanted to be lenient in confessing to the Imperial Preceptor. In order to make up for the Imperial Preceptor's deceived heart, she planned to draw a portrait for the Imperial Preceptor. Originally I just wanted to draw the Master, but thinking that he hadn't seen his daughter for so many years, I decided to draw Feng Wu. Xiao Jinyan was so smart that he immediately guessed Shen Chuwei's thoughts. The sketches she drew were very close to real people. Although they didn't have the artistic conception of paintings, they were indeed suitable for memory. After Shen Chuwei finished eating the pastries, he picked up the drawing board and continued painting, because the Imperial Master had been back in the past few days, and he would not be able to finish the painting if he did not paint. Xiao Jinyan sat next to her and watched her painting with his own eyes. He had noticed before that her painting techniques were very different from those here. After watching for a while, the outline of the Imperial Master gradually emerged. He couldn't help but ask, you had the idea of painting the Master from the beginning, right? Shen Chuwei paused in his painting and turned to look at Xiao Jinyan. How do you know? When you first drew me, it was because of my appearance. The State Master is handsome and extraordinary. Don't you have any ideas? Xiao Jinyan looked as if he had seen through your thoughts. I have this idea. I have never seen a handsome man like the State Master in my life. If I don't draw, I will age. Shen Chuwei was somewhat fortunate that the State Master might be his father, otherwise with Xiao Jinyan's personality, he would definitely be jealous. It's no problem to draw the State Master. Xiao Jinyan changed the subject, but other men can't. Shen Chuwei. Look, I haven't drawn it yet, I'm jealous in advance. Next time, draw our family of 4. Xiao Jinyan actually missed Dao Tao and Susu very much. It was the first time he was away from home for so long. The two little guys might not remember him as their father. Okay, Shen Shuwei was ready to continue painting. After painting for a while, she suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Xiao Jinyan. Why did you say that that night? The sudden question made Xiao Jinyan a little confused. What did you say? Shen Shuwei said, that night when I wanted to go back to Daxia. What did you say to me? What did you mean? Xiao Jinyan still remembers that night, because the fear of losing him has left a shadow in his heart. Wait until you remember the past, I'll tell you. Xiao Jinyan kept it a secret. Shen Shuwei pouted in dissatisfaction, and even learned to keep it a secret. Before dinner, Jun Wuxian brought Su Qingqing into the palace. This time it was open and above board. Su Qingqing followed Jun Wuxian slowly, swinging her handkerchief, and she was completely different from before. Shen Shuwei still remembered that when Su Qingqing was in the palace, the handkerchief was swinging closely and followed her steps, and the sound came before the person. Now that they are in love, they have become gentle. Su Qingqing walked over with a cheerful step, looking at Wu Palace and said with a smile, Wai Wei, you live here? Yes, I have lived here since I entered the palace. Shen Shuwei looked at the two people in front of her and said, you came at the right time, we can have dinner together. Su Qingqing leaned close to Shen Shuwei's ear and asked, does the prince live here too? Shen Shuwei nodded, yes, it was the Grand Master who let him in. The Grand Master said something, and even the Emperor would not say a word. Su Qingqing thought that the Grand Master was her future eunuch, and couldn't help asking, is the Grand Master easy to get along with? Shen Shuwei immediately saw Su Qingqing's little thoughts, and smiled and comforted, easy to get along with, the Grand Master looks cold and elegant, but he is actually quite gentle, don't worry. Su Qingqing believed Shen Shuwei's words without a doubt. She was afraid that her future eunuch would not like her, but she was not worried now. Shen Shuwei smiled and leaned close to her ear and said, the Imperial Master is super handsome and super young. In Su Qingqing's eyes, her father-in-law is just an old man in his 50s. After hearing what Shen Shuwei said, she couldn't help but feel curious. How handsome and how young? Shen Shuwei asked, is Xiao Jinyan super handsome? Su Qingqing nodded. If he wasn't super handsome, she couldn't think of entering the palace just because of that face. The Imperial Master is as handsome as Xiao Jinyan, but Xiao Jinyan is aloof, while the Imperial Master is cold and elegant, and he looks like he's less than 30 years old. Shen Shuwei became more and more proud as she spoke, because the Imperial Master is very likely her father. When she thought of having such a handsome father, she was so pleasing to the eyes. If this was said by someone else, Su Qingqing would definitely not believe it, but if it came from Shen Shuwei, she would believe it. However, even though she believed it, she couldn't help but show a shocked expression. Really? The future father-in-law is so young. Su Qingqing turned her head and looked at Jun Wuxian. Axian is already 30 years old, I thought he was only 26 years old. The future father-in-law is so young, standing with Axian, wouldn't he look like a brother? She said the last sentence in a very low voice. But no matter how low it was, Jun Wuxian heard it. He coughed lightly, my father is indeed very young, and it is indeed easy to be misunderstood. Shen Chu smiled and said, you should be happy, with such good genes, the baby born will definitely be super cute and smart. Su Qingqing subconsciously glanced at Jun Wuxian when she heard it, and saw that he was looking at her, her face flushed. Thinking of Dao Tao and Susu, it would be a happy thing if such a cute baby could be born. By the way, I have prepared the ointment. Shen Shuwei took out a bottle of ointment from his sleeve pocket and handed it to Su Qingqing, apply it morning and night, don't expose it to the sun. Su Qingqing happily picked up the small bottle, a very ordinary small white bottle, but it was very important to her. I know, he put it away carefully. Jun Wuxian watched the two of them talking to each other, and looked not far away, and saw Xiao Jinyan coming over. Xiao Jinyan. When Xiao Jinyan looked at Jun Wuxian, he thought of seeing him in Daxia, and the mysterious man in black. Brother-in-law. Jun Wuxian didn't have a good impression of Xiao Jinyan, especially when he was in Daxia. He was surrounded by a bunch of women, and he let Su Qingqing stay alone in the empty room for several years. Scumbag. I'm not your brother-in-law. Xiao Jinyan heard the unkindness in Jun Wuxian's tone. He smiled and said, "You are Xiaoju's brother. Xiaoju is my first wife. What else can I call you if not brother-in-law?" Jun Wuxian snorted, "We Jun family don't recognize you as a son-in-law." Xiao Jinyan was not annoyed. "When my father-in-law comes back, I will explain it in person and ask him to agree." Shen Chuwei and Su Qingqing came over and looked at them curiously. "What are you talking about? Let's go for dinner." Xiao Jinyan and Jun Wuxian looked at each other, smiled, and followed Shen Chuwei to the restaurant. On the dining table, 4 people sat around the table. Shen Chuwei was already hungry, so she picked up the chopsticks and picked up the dishes while inviting them to eat. Su Qingqing also picked up the chopsticks and picked up the dishes and ate them in small bites. Jun Wuxian thought of what Xiao Jinyan said just now and asked Shen Chuwei, "Have you discovered that you are Feng Wu?" Shen Chuwei didn't say anything after hearing this, but took out Po Yu and showed it to Jun Wuxian. "Do you recognize this?" Jun Wuxian saw that the dagger looked familiar, reached out and took it, and recognized it as Po Yu. "This is Po Yu, my father gave it to Xiaoju for self-defense." After Jun Wuxian finished speaking, he suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked at Shen Chuwei. "Is this yours?" Shen Chuwei nodded. "I have been carrying it since I was 10 years old." Jun Wuxian was stunned for a while, and then smiled and said, "Doesn't that prove that you are Xiaoju?" Xiao Jinyan said, "Xiaoju, and I think so too, but there are still many doubts that have not been solved. Let's wait for my father-in-law to come back." Su Qingqing looked at Shen Chuwei happily. "Then will we become sister-in-law?" Shen Chuwei smiled when she heard this. "You are right, it seems that we are still destined." Su Qingqing nodded vigorously. "No wonder I like you more and more, because we are destined to be relatives." Shen Chuwei couldn't help laughing out loud. Xiao Jinyan and Jun Wuxian looked at Xiaoju at the same time, and saw that she was smiling with curved eyebrows and eyes. Almost at the same time, they thought of Xiaoju's smile when she was a child, which was particularly lovable. Jun Wuxian and Su Qingqing temporarily lived in Wu Palace. After Shen Chuwei woke up, she took the drawing board and started to draw. The painting was almost done, and she tried to finish it before the national teacher came back. Because she was too involved, she didn't even know that someone was approaching. Jun Mocking went out for a few days and returned to the palace as soon as he finished his business. When he stepped into Wu Palace, he saw Xiaoju sitting in front of the stone table, writing and drawing seriously. He walked over with curiosity. Jun Mocking walked behind his daughter and looked down to find that she was drawing, and the person in the painting was actually him, holding a little girl in his hand. The girl was only 5 or 6 years old, with 2 small sideburns on her head, and her beautiful big eyes smiled into crescents. He suddenly sighed that time passed so quickly. She who used to call daddy in a baby voice has grown into a big girl. I didn't expect Xiaoju to learn sketching. Please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. Good night. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 594. Shen Chuwei, who was drawing seriously, suddenly heard a cold voice. Even though the voice was pleasant, she was still startled. She looked up and saw a handsome face. When the cold eyes looked at her, it seemed to be with an imperceptible tenderness. After a few seconds of stunned, she stood up with a smile. "Dad, you are back." Jun Mocking nodded. "Well, I didn't realize that you are not only serious about eating, but also about drawing." Shen Shuwei was a little embarrassed. I drew it for fun. Jun mocking said, let me see. Shen Shuwei just thought about it and handed the drawing board to the national teacher. It's not finished yet. Jun mocking took the drawing board and looked at the characters in the painting. The distance just now was far away and the distance now was close, and the feeling of seeing was completely different. In the painting, he was half-side profile, his eyebrows and eyes were vivid, and his clothes were the blue and white suit he often wore. He was holding a candied hose in his hand and handing it to the greedy little girl. The girl smiled very sweetly. Whether it was his calm and coldness or the immaturity of the little girl, they were painted vividly. Shen Shuwei looked at the master of the state with curiosity. Dad, how do you know this is a sketch? I've seen it, so I know. Jun mocking continued to look at the painting. This was the second time his daughter had drawn him and herself. The painting was much better than before. The only thing that remained unchanged was that he always bought her candied hose. Shen Shuwei asked, where have you seen it? Is there one here? Jun mocking looked at his daughter and saw that she was looking at him curiously. Do you think there is one here? Shen Shuwei shook her head. I haven't seen it, and Jinyan hasn't seen it either. Sketches originated in Europe and were later introduced to China. Sketches had not appeared in ancient times. Father. Jun Wuxian strode over. Su Qingqing followed slowly behind, secretly glancing at her future father-in-law. If there was not only one man standing next to Shen Shuwei, she really wouldn't think that such a handsome and young man would be her father-in-law. Shen Shuwei did not lie to her. Her future father-in-law was really super handsome and super young. Jun mocking looked up and saw Jun Wuxian. You're back too. I came back after hearing the news about Xiaju. Jun Wuxian said, looking sideways at Su Qingqing, holding her hand and bringing her to the front. Father, this is my fiancée Su Qingqing. Su Qingqing was already embarrassed, and she was even more embarrassed in front of the super handsome and super young father-in-law. She didn't even dare to raise her head. Hello, uncle. When Jun mocking heard that there was a daughter-in-law, he looked at the girl next to Jun Wuxian and saw that she kept her head down, and asked Jun Wuxian, what's wrong with her? Jun Wuxian looked down at Su Qingqing and saw her blushing little face, and smiled and said, Father, she's shy. Su Qingqing pinched Jun Wuxian's palm. She was really embarrassed, and she was even more embarrassed to say it out loud. Jun Wuxian noticed Su Qingqing's little action, smiled and said, Qingqing, let my father see what my daughter-in-law looks like. Su Qingqing was not only shy and didn't dare to raise her head, but also because her face had only been applied for 2 days and the effect of the ointment was not obvious. Letting the future father-in-law see the disfigured face, more or less, still makes her feel a little inferior. She pursed her lips, slowly raised her head to look at the future father-in-law, and was still amazed when she saw the beautiful face again. Jun mocking saw the scar on Su Qingqing's face and guessed the reason why she kept her head down. If there was no scar, she would also be a pretty girl. When do you plan to get married? Jun Wuxian said, Father, I plan to get married at the end of the year. Jun mocking, well, you are not young anymore, it's time to get married soon, and you can't treat the girl badly. Jun Wuxian nodded and said, Father, don't worry, I will treat her well. Su Qingqing had been holding Jun Wuxian's hand nervously, thinking that the future father-in-law would say something, but he didn't say anything, but asked Jun Wuxian to treat her well. They were all right, the future father-in-law was not a picky person, and he was easy to get along with. Now that they really met, the nervous mood gradually relaxed. At this time, Xiao Jinyan also came over, stood beside Shen Shuwei, and greeted his future father-in-law, Master Imperial Master. Jun mocking glanced at Xiao Jinyan, then retracted his gaze and continued to look at the painting in his hand. Shen Shuwei was still curious about why Master Imperial Master knew about sketching, so she tugged at Master Imperial Master's sleeve. After June Mocking noticed it, he looked down at Xiaoju and asked in a gentle voice, "What's wrong?" Shen Shuwei looked at him expectantly, "Let's talk." June Mocking, "Okay." Shen Shuwei's eyebrows curved. June Mocking took the drawing board and walked into the study with his daughter. Xiao Jinyan and Jun Wuxian followed behind, but were stopped outside the door. "You are not allowed to come in." June Mocking closed the door after he finished speaking. Xuehui stood guard at the door. Xiao Jinyan and Jun Wuxian looked at each other. June Mocking didn't let them in, so they naturally didn't dare to break in. But both of them guessed that Xiaoju's chat with June Mocking was definitely related to her life experience. In the study, June Mocking and Shen Shuwei sat at the table with tea and cakes on it. There were only the two of them in the study, so quiet that they could hear their nervous heartbeats. Shen Shuwei picked up the teapot and poured a cup of tea for the national teacher, and poured a cup of tea for herself. June Mocking picked up the teacup and put it to his lips. He took 2 sips of tea and looked at his daughter. "What do you want to talk about?" Shen Shuwei took a teacup and sipped tea to relieve her nervousness. After taking a few sips of tea, she slowly said, "I originally thought that I was not your daughter." June Mocking looked at her calmly. "Why do you think so?" "Because of many reasons." Shen Shuwei took 2 more sips of tea and continued, "In fact, I am still not sure whether I am your daughter." June Mocking was curious about her thoughts. "Tell me about it." Shen Shuwei told the national teacher her original thoughts and reasons one by one. After that, he asked, "Do you think it's complicated?" June Mocking shook his head. "It's not complicated in my opinion." "Did you think you were pretending to be Xiaoju at first?" Shen Shuwei nodded embarrassedly, and was a little embarrassed. "At first I didn't think of pretending to be Fengwu. It was the emperor who said I was Fengwu and asked me to live in the palace. Later, I heard that the national master would come to the capital city, and I happened to be looking for you, so I followed the emperor's wishes and continued to be Princess Juyu." June Mocking knew without asking that Ye Haoding thought she was Xiaoju. In addition to this face, there were also Kiu, Tiger Lion Beast and Swichuan. "Then why did you look for me in the first place? Didn't Xiao Jinyan lose his memory? I heard that the national master is super powerful and must have a way to help him restore his memory, so I thought of looking for you." Shen Shuwei didn't forget to flatter. "I see." June Mocking took a sip of tea and said faintly, "But it's normal for you to have such thoughts. Traveling from modern times to ancient times, and it's a soul travel, you definitely don't think you are originally from here, plus you have lost your memory, you have 10 years of modern knowledge and ideas, and there is no paternity test here, it's easy to prove the father-daughter relationship." "That's right, so Xiao Jinyan and the others said I was Fengwu, I couldn't tell them about the time travel." Shen Shuwei said with a curious look in front of June Mocking. "Then how did you recognize me as your daughter at first sight? It's better than paternity test? And how do you know modern knowledge?" June Mocking explained, "Our spaces are connected, so I knew it when I stepped into Wu Palace. And your face, the face is born from the heart, you have been back for a few years, so you can also see it from your face." Shen Shuwei was shocked and curious when she heard it. She grabbed June Mocking's arm and asked, "What is the connection between our spaces?" June Mocking, "I gave you your space, I can feel it, but you can't. It's like the main unit and the auxiliary unit." "Can it be like this?" When Shen Shuwei found out that she had a space, she thought she had a golden finger so awesome. It turned out that it was because she had an awesome father. Too awesome. Shen Shuwei's tone was full of expectation. "Then can you travel to the modern times?" June Mocking shook his head. "No." Shen Shuwei asked doubtfully, "Why?" "After you disappeared, I made an exception and told you that you were doomed to die. From the hexagram, there is a way to break it, and you can be reborn after being put to death. The moment your soul traveled through time and space was equivalent to experiencing life and death, and breaking the doom. If I could travel to the modern times, I would not leave you alone there. June Mocking said slowly. As a father, how could he not look for his daughter who he had raised suddenly disappeared? It's just that he knew his daughter was in another place, but he couldn't accompany her. Thinking about her spoiled life, going to a strange place, who would she meet? Will someone bully her? These are all unknown. Shen Shuwei was so moved after hearing this. With such a father, what else can she ask for as a daughter? If you can't accompany the soul through the body, then why don't you care about the body? This body was almost destroyed by someone. June Mocking touched her head. Everything is destined in the dark. Excessive intervention will only backfire, understand? Shen Shuwei immediately understood after hearing this. I understand. If you find her and keep her by my side, I may not be able to travel back, right? This body was traveled by the soul. If June Mocking had been with her, with such a powerful father to protect her, she would not have experienced things like fighting for favor, and death would not be so easy. Moreover, the soul travel requires the right time, place, and people, so that after the soul traveler dies, she happens to encounter an accident and travel back again. June Mocking nodded in approval. This is the cause and effect relationship. Shen Shuwei tilted her head and asked, you can't go to the modern world, so how do you know the knowledge of the modern world? June Mocking stared at his daughter for a long time, and then slowly said, because, I originally traveled from the modern world, but it is a little different from your modern world, belonging to the balanced space. He has not told anyone about his being a traveler, not even Xiaoju's mother. Shen Shuwei opened her eyes wide upon hearing this, and looked at her father in disbelief. You are a time traveler? From modern times? June Mocking said, of course, otherwise where did the new things you ate and played with when you were a child come from? When Shen Shuwei thought of the treatment she had received when she was a child, she almost jumped up with excitement. I am probably the happiest person in the world. Who dares to compete with me for a father? I envy her to death. June Mocking saw his daughter so excited. Sure enough, she grew up, experienced some things, and became independent. Except for her love of competing for a father, she has not changed. After Shen Shuwei was excited, she grabbed June Mocking's hand and asked seriously, are you really my father? June Mocking hugged his daughter in his arms. She was so young back then. When he held her in his arms, she was a little bit big, and he didn't dare to use force. He held her carefully for fear of hurting her. Now that my daughter has grown up, I can no longer find the feeling of her childhood. Of course, it's real. Shen Shuwei's eyebrows curved with joy. I have been an orphan for so many years, but I didn't expect that I have a father, who is also very powerful and handsome. June Mocking heard this and thought of his daughter when she was 5 years old. Other children had mothers and kissed her mother. Xiaoju would tell others that my father is very handsome and powerful. Shen Shuwei suddenly felt that her life was perfect. She had such a handsome father, a very handsome husband, and a pair of children. Speaking of children, she had not told June Mocking that she was married. Shen Shuwei stared at June Mocking for a long time, thinking about how to start so as not to surprise him. June Mocking asked, do you want to recover your memory? Shen Shuwei asked, can you recover your memory before the age of 10? June Mocking nodded, yes, it's just a little troublesome. Shen Shuwei said, if you can remember it, it would be great. If it makes Dad too worried, it's okay if you don't recover it. Anyway, we have already recognized each other. It's better to have a complete memory. I will help you recover your memory in 2 days. June Mocking actually still hopes that his daughter will be closer to him, like when they were little, pulling his sleeves and following behind, eating and shouting in a baby voice, Daddy, I want more. Shen Shuwei began to get excited again. She could recover her previous memories, memories related to Xiao Jinyan. She wanted to know how she got along with Xiao Jinyan when she was a child, so that he would always miss her and couldn't let go. June mocking suddenly asked, "What do you want for dinner?" Shen Shui's eyes curved, "What do you want to eat, Dad? I'll cook for you myself." "Just follow your preferences," June mocking said, and couldn't help ordering a dish, sourfish. Shen Shu smiled and said, "No problem, sourfish, I like it too." When Shen Shui happily opened the door, she saw Xiao Jinyan standing upright at the bottom of the steps. When she heard the door open, she looked up and followed him. "Xiaoju, how was your chat with the national teacher?" "We talked a lot, but it's confirmed that I'm Feng Wu." "Dad is really amazing." Shen Shui smiled and pulled Xiao Jinyan to the side hall. After hearing this, Xiao Jinyan's heart was completely relieved, because now she was 100% sure that she was Xiaoju, and there was nothing happier than this. "Then have you told your father-in-law about our relationship?" It's no wonder that Xiao Jinyan was a little anxious. After all, he was not favored at the beginning, and the national teacher had originally chosen Yesuhan as his son-in-law. Shen Shui paused, a little embarrassed. "I wanted to mention it just now, but I forgot it when I was so happy." "Babies, please vote for the monthly ticket to climb the list. It has been hinted many times that the heroine's father is a time traveler." Then promote a wave of new books. Currently only here can add bookshelves in advance, other channels can only be seen after signing. New books are pre-collected, babies can add bookshelves in advance. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 595. Chapter 595, After learning that my daughter was a concubine, I got angry and was shocked to find out that I was a grandfather. Xiao Jinyan could understand that she had just confirmed her identity and recognized her father who had been separated for so many years, so it was normal for her to happily forget about it. "It's okay, I'll do the same thing next time. I'm looking for an opportunity to talk to my dad. Today is a very happy day and we need to celebrate it properly." At this time, she was still immersed in the emotion of recognizing her dad. Anyone who has such a handsome and powerful dad would be excited. Dancing. Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaoju. After coming out of the study, he kept smiling. He was happier than eating 2 crystal elbows. "You and your father-in-law have been separated for so many years. It's time to celebrate." The corners of Shen Shui's mouth turned up uncontrollably. "I plan to cook it myself. Dad wants to eat pickled fish, and I want to eat it too. When I think about cooking as a parent and preparing a table of meals, I have to ask the little palace maid to prepare the ingredients in advance." Xiao Jinyan thought that his father-in-law had helped restore his memory, and Xiaoju's memory might also be restored. "What about your memory? Did your father-in-law say anything about helping you recover it?" "Yes, my father said he would help me recover my memory in 2 days." Now Shen Shui talks about her father more smoothly than ever. Shen Shui also felt that from this moment on, she would be called Feng Wu. Thinking that she was Feng Wu now, she discovered an important question: why did her last name differ from her father's? Dad's surname is Jun, and her surname is Feng? Xiao Jinyan was happy and excited when she learned that she could regain her memory in 2 days. When Xiaoju regained her memory, she would remember the memories of their childhood. Finding Xiaoju frowning, he asked doubtfully, "What's wrong?" Feng Wu expressed his doubts. "Why don't I have the same surname as my father, but Feng?" Xiao Jinyan thought for a moment and then said, "Could it be that your mother's surname is Feng?" "Possible. I heard her father say that her mother disappeared suddenly, and she might not have seen her mother. It's not easy to talk about daddy. A grown man takes care of her and raises her alone. The key is that after so many years, my father has no idea of marrying another man, which is commendable." Xiao Jinyan held her in his arms, and the emotions he had suppressed for a long time relaxed a lot because the mystery was solved. What was even more fortunate was that he liked Feng Wu and later met Shen Shui. Even if he forgot, he would still like her. Like it is complete without any flaws. He was also glad that what he always insisted on was right. After you recover your memory, we will go back to Daxia. I miss Dao Tao and Susu. Feng Wu nodded vigorously. Okay, I miss them so much. They say children change every day, and I don't know how they are doing now. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. I also want to tell Dad that he has not only become father-in-law, but also grandfather. He will definitely be very happy. Xiao Jinyan hugged her, thinking it would be nice if he didn't get angry. He abducted the daughter of the Imperial Master. However, father-in-law would be very happy to see Dao Tao and Susu. Feng Wu spent an hour cooking a table of dishes, and the 5 members of the family sat around the table. Su Qingqing glanced at the food in front of her. Having eaten at Hehuan Hall countless times, she recognized at a glance that these meals were made by Xiaju. She looked at Feng Wu with a smile. Xiaju, have you cooked the food yourself? Yes, we must celebrate today. Feng Wu smiled and looked at Jun mocking. Dad, are you drinking? Jun mocking said, I'm happy today, let's drink a little. Jun Wuxian was a little surprised. Xiaju can also cook. Xiaju's cooking is delicious. Su Qingqing's proud expression made it seem like she was the one who knew how to cook. Jun Wuxian saw that the food on the table looked good, and when he heard Su Qingqing say it, he was surprised but also looking forward to it. Then I want to try Xiaju's cooking skills. Feng Wu asked people to get wine, first poured a glass for his father, and then poured a glass each for Xiao Jinyan and Jun Wuxian. Brother, Jinyan, you two have a drink with Dad. Father-in-law, of course Xiao Jinyan wants to drink 2 glasses of wine, okay. Jun Wuxian hasn't had a drink with his father for a long time. Today is another happy day when he meets his sister, so naturally he has to drink 2 drinks. The men were drinking, while Feng Wu and Su Qingqing lowered their heads to eat. One was greedy, and the other was greedy for Xiaju's cooking skills. After drinking for 3 rounds, Jun Wuxian thought about his marriage. Although his father didn't care about him, it would be better to ask about it. Father, Qingqing and I plan to get married in Daxia at the end of the year. Does Dad have any objections? When it came to marriage, Su Qingqing's heart suddenly rose to her throat. Facing her handsome and powerful father-in-law, she didn't dare to express her anger, so she could only listen with her ears open. Jun mocking spoke slowly, I don't have any objections. It's time for you to get married by the end of the year. There's not much time until the end of the year. You should go back to Daxia early to prepare. Jun Wuxian nodded and replied, I know that father is planning to return to Daxia in 2 days to prepare for the wedding. Su Qingqing secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The future father-in-law was so talkative. No wonder Jun Wuxian got engaged when he said he was engaged. He didn't even notify the future father-in-law, and the future father-in-law wasn't angry either. Jun mocking glanced at Xiao Jinyan, then his eyes fell on her daughter, and saw that her little mouth had never stopped eating from the moment she started eating. He looked away, raised the glass to his lips and took a sip of wine. Xiao Jinyan noticed the eyes from his father-in-law and thought that his father-in-law would ask him questions, but he didn't. It would be better to tell Xiaoju that he and he are married sooner rather than later. As a man, it would be best for him to tell the truth. Dinner was almost over. Xiao Jinyan put down the chopsticks in his hand, picked up the wet handkerchief and wiped the corner of his mouth elegantly. After wiping, he stood up and bowed to his father-in-law. Master Kuashi. Xiao Jinyan suddenly stood up, and everyone looked at him. Jun mocking raised his eyes and looked at Xiao Jinyan indifferently. Feng Wu asked in confusion, Jinyan, what are you doing? Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at Xiaoju, it's better to make it clear today. Feng Wu immediately understood that Xiao Jinyan wanted to confess and be lenient. She nodded. It would be better to tell it earlier, so that her father would not say that Xiao Jinyan had deceived her. June Mocking looked at the two people's actions and guessed that Xiao Jinyan had something important to say. He put down the chopsticks in his hand, picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea, waiting for Xiao Jinyan's next words. Xiao Jinyan then looked at June Mocking again. Master Kiwashi, now the son-in-law should call you dad. June Mocking seemed to have guessed it, and his voice was a little cold. Don't rush to call dad, I haven't agreed to let Xiaju marry you yet. Xiao Jinyan said, but Xiaju and I got married a long time ago. At that time, I didn't know Xiaju's identity, so I didn't ask for dad's consent in time. It is said that the first time is new, the second time is familiar. After calling dad twice, it became smooth. Fortunately, he and Xiaju fell in love and married when they didn't remember each other. June Mocking paused when drinking tea, and when he looked at Xiaju, he put down the teacup. Xiaju, what's going on? He didn't even know that his daughter was married. How could he be calm? Even Jun Wuxian, who was standing by, noticed that his father, who was always calm and composed, was not calm for the first time. This is the difference between a daughter and a son. When he got married, his father was casual, but when Xiaju got married, his face changed immediately. Feng Wuo smiled to ease the tense atmosphere. Dad, when I came here, I was already Xiao Jinyan's concubine. At this time, June Mocking didn't even care about the destiny in the dark. How could his beloved daughter become a concubine? What's the difference between that and the modern mistress? He was immediately angry. I don't know that Xiaju got married, but how can she be a concubine? June Mocking felt that he had reached a state where he would not get angry because of one thing. For so many years, he could deal with everything calmly and calmly. But this time, he couldn't deal with it calmly and calmly. Xiao Jinyan, are you marrying me? I really give you face. Su Qingqing thought her future father-in-law was very easy to talk to, and was glad that she was so lucky. But in less than a cup of tea, she saw her future father-in-law get angry. Jun Wuxian's hand was holding Su Qingqing's hand under the table, comforting her not to be afraid, and explained with his eyes that the target of his anger was Xiao Jinyan, not us. Su Qingqing opened her eyes wide, but she didn't understand what Jun Wuxian meant in his eyes, but she felt safe when he held her hand. Feng Wuxian saw his father getting angry, and immediately grabbed his hand and explained, "Don't worry, Dad, I have climbed from a concubine to the position of the crown princess. Although the process was a bit difficult, the result is good." Feng Wu's words did not make June Mocking calm down, but made him even angrier. Does my daughter need to compete with other women for favor? Xiao Jinyan explained, Dad. June Mocking said coldly, "Don't call me Dad, I don't agree with this marriage, without my consent, it won't count." Feng Wu stood up immediately, patted his father's back as if to comfort him, and used one hand to calm him down. "Dad, don't be angry, don't be angry, how can I compete with a bunch of women for favor? They are busy competing for favor, I am busy eating and drinking, and I don't have time to compete for favor." June Mocking's eyes paused when he heard this, and he looked up at his daughter. How could he forget his daughter's temperament? How could a child brought up by a modern man compete for favor for a man like other women? June Mocking told his daughter since she was a child that men are not important, and being happy is the most important thing. A man with a lot of women is not acceptable, a man with sweet mouth is not acceptable, a man who only talks but does not do is not acceptable, and so on. Being a small salted fish, not caring about things and not worrying about things is the most relaxed and happy. The reason why he let his daughter be a salted fish is because with him, his daughter can always be carefree. At the same time, he will still teach his daughter some self-protection skills. Being a salted fish does not mean being useless. He also specially chose a future husband for Xiaoju, that person is Yesuhan, who can do all the requirements he put forward and never take concubines for life. Who would have thought that she was deceived by Xiao Jinyan? June Mocking glanced at Xiao Jinyan with disdain. Then why do you like him? Feng Wei looked at Xiao Jinyan and found that Xiao Jinyan was also looking at her. She retracted her gaze and said with a smile, Xiao Jinyan is very handsome, but I will not be confused by beauty. June Mocking showed an approving look. With a father like him, she should be able to withstand the temptation of beauty. This is his daughter. Xiao Jinyan. He began to suspect that Xiaju was attracted by his beauty. I wanted to be a salted fish and eat and drink for free, but... Feng Wei glanced at Xiao Jinyan, but he said that he only had me as a woman and would never touch other women in the future, so I compromised. In ancient times, it was really hard to find such a handsome and loyal man. How could you not be tempted when you met him? June Mocking. Xiao Jinyan. Feng Wei continued, Jinyan did it and made me the crown prince. I can't say what will happen in the future. Cherishing the present is the most important thing. Dad, do you think what I said is right? June Mocking looked at her daughter and found that she had really grown up, knew how to choose, and had her own bottom line. He has been worried since his daughter was born, fearing that her daughter would live like a woman here, respecting men, relying on men to survive, and competing with a bunch of women for a man. Therefore, when Xiaju's mother disappeared, he could be said to have been with his daughter every step of the way. No matter how old she was, he taught her personally and never took advantage of her. Xiaju has grown up. There are some things that you have your own sense of. If you think it's okay, then it's right. Feng Wei frowned after hearing this. Father also said that some things are predetermined, so before I came here, it was all destined, otherwise I wouldn't have met Xiao Jinyan. June Mocking felt a little regretful. If I had known that you were working as a concubine for someone else, I would have taken you away a long time ago. June Mocking can do calculations, but when it comes to fortune telling, it's not just a matter of calculation. Sometimes it can be counterproductive. So he only calculated it once for his daughter, and the disaster of death was resolved, and the fate of great wealth and wealth would follow. If he knew she would become a concubine, he would take his daughter away no matter what. Feng Wei smiled and said, Dad, the beginning is not important, what is important is the result. June Mocking couldn't keep a cold face towards her daughter, but her daughter had indeed grown up, understood a lot, and what she said made sense. Xiao Jinyan then promised, Dad, I will treat Xiaju well and protect her for the rest of her life. I will never let her be wronged. Jun Wuxian knew why his father was angry. He was also very angry at that time, when Xiaoju's identity was not confirmed. However, I learned from Su Qingqing that Xiao Jinyan treated Xiaju very well, otherwise he would not let Xiao Jinyan go. Father, it doesn't matter if you don't agree, your grandchildren will all be confused. June Mocking was startled when he heard this, almost thinking that his ears were weak, so he asked again uncertainly, what do you mean? Feng Wei was a little embarrassed, and even her voice softened a bit. Dad, you have a grandson and a granddaughter. She is already over 2 years old, and she is very smart. The last sentence was specially emphasized with a bit of pride. June Mocking was stunned for a long time. He really never thought that he would be a grandfather. In his eyes, his daughter was still a child. Getting married was enough to shock him, let alone giving birth to a child. He actually has grandchildren? Then why didn't you tell me earlier? Recommended to pre-accept the new book. The fake daughter only wants to be a salted fish and is pampered when the book is released. The title including the introduction will be changed. There will be some discrepancies. Babies can end bookshelf first. Babies, please give me monthly tickets. Good night Spicy. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 596. Dad, didn't we just meet? I can't say this without confirming our identities at the beginning, right? Fenghui blinked her beautiful big eyes and said it confidently. June Mocking felt that what his daughter said made some sense, but in his eyes, they had already recognized each other from the moment they met again. Who knew that his daughter had hidden thoughts in her heart? No wonder she refused when he said he would help her recover her memory at the beginning. It turned out that she was guilty. Have you drawn pictures for them? June Mocking was a little impatient to see what his grandson and granddaughter looked like, and whether they would be as cute as his daughter when she was a child. Fenghui was stunned when she heard this. The two babies were so cute, but she didn't draw pictures for them. What a pity. She must draw pictures for the babies once a year in the future. When they grow up, they will know what they looked like when they were children. Dad, I forgot to draw. June Mocking was a little disappointed when he heard this. I can only go to Daxia to see them. June Wuxian guessed that he was anxious to see Dao Tao and Susu when he saw June Mocking's tone. Father, Dao Tao and Susu are twins, a boy and a girl. Susu and Xiaju looked a lot like each other when they were little. June Mocking looked over when he heard this. Have you seen them? June Wuxian thought of the little appearance of Dao Tao and Susu, and nodded with a smile. Yes, I saw them once on Chang'an Street before I came here. They are very cute and smart. Fenghui looked at June Wuxian in confusion. When did Dao Tao and Susu go to Chang'an Street? Who took them there? June Wuxian said, on the Chinese Valentine's Day, their grandparents took them out to play. Coincidentally, I happened to rush to the capital that day and met them. Fenghui understood that it was his father and mother who came out to celebrate Valentine's Day, and then took Dao Tao and Susu out to play. It's the first time for these two guys to leave the palace. I'm afraid they are as excited as divine beasts out of the cage. I can't stop them. That's right. Susu was so excited that she ran into my arms. When I saw that pink little face, I felt like I saw you when you were a child. June Wuxian glanced at Su Qingqing. Qingqing was there at the time, and I knew that the two children were yours. Su Qingqing smiled and said, I miss the two little guys. Fenghui turned his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. Does Susu really look like me? Xiao Jinyan thought of his youngest daughter. Although she was only a little over 1 year old when she left, her greedy look was very similar to Xiaju. Yeah, very similar, especially like to eat. Fenghui thought of the scene of the little guy turning around and running away with food, and nodded in agreement. Yes, she knows to snatch food from me. Xiao Jinyan also thought of that time, because Xiaju only gave Susu a bite to try every time. Susu learned to be smart after a few times and ran away with the food. June Mocking wanted to see his two grandchildren, whom he had never met before. Perhaps because he had been a nanny, he wanted to see the feeling of raising his daughter alone through the two little ones. Then get ready and go to Daxia early. Not only June Mocking couldn't wait, Fenghui couldn't wait to go back. It's time to prepare to go back to Daxia. I'm afraid the two babies don't remember me and Jinyan. Before going back to Daxia, the first thing to do is to restore Fenghui's memory, but this will be 2 days later. After dinner, Fenghui and Xiao Jinyan returned to the side hall. As soon as she entered the door, she was hugged by Xiao Jinyan and could smell the wine on him. What, are you drunk? Xiao Jinyan whispered in her ear, I just drank 2 glasses, I'm not drunk, I just want to hug you. Fenghui couldn't help laughing and said, we meet every day, there's no need to be so sentimental. But Xiao Jinyan held her tightly and made her feel his happiness at this time. I feel like I'm dreaming. Fenghui raised her head. Xiao Jinyan said faintly, 10 years ago, I thought I had lost you, but luckily you appeared in front of me again, and luckily I still like you. How can you say you lost me? It must be the bad guys who kidnapped me and separated me from my father for so many years. Fenghui said this, staring at Xiao Jinyan with her beautiful eyes for a long time. You always think I am Feng Wu, why do you still say that? Do you know how sad I am? She even thought of a way out, going back to Daxia and divorcing Xiao Jinyan. She took Susu away. Dao Tao was a prince and could only be left to Xiao Jinyan. There are many rare treasures and gold and silver in her space. She can eat for 3 lifetimes no matter how much she eats, and Susu can eat enough for her. Either separate, she doesn't care about anything, continue to eat and drink like a salted fish, and can see Dao Tao and Susu every day. In fact, when she decided to be with Xiao Jinyan, she left a way out. After all, people will change, not to mention that she can have a future heir with 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. It's just that they have been married for so many years, they have always been in love, and they have 2 cute babies. Their feelings have only increased. So when that day really comes, it will be very sad. I'm sorry, I didn't expect to experience such a thing. You always think that you are not Feng Wu. If I repeatedly emphasize that you are, you will think that you think so because you have a bad choice. Xiao Jinyan lowered his head and kissed her forehead, nose tip, and then landed on her lips. When you recover your memory, you will feel differently. Feng Wu pouted dissatisfiedly, what's the difference? It will only make me sad again. Xiao Jinyan paused and chuckled, you are right. No matter who you choose, you will be sad. But you are very important to me when you were a child. You are a memory that I cannot give up. If it was not an accident or forced, I would not choose to forget. You are still very important to me now. The relationship of more than 4 years is no less than when we were children. We were childhood sweethearts before, and now we are my wife. I am glad that it is you all the time. Feng Wu was confused, what accident? What forced? The bad guy who caught you was very skilled in martial arts. I was no match for him. After I was injured, Yesuhan came over. He said that he wanted me to save you unless I voluntarily forgot you. Xiao Jinyan spoke slowly, and gritted his teeth at the end. He did not regret making a choice, but that he did not exchange the most precious and cherished memory for Xiaoju's safety. Yesuhan lied to him. Feng Wu knocked on Xiao Jinyan's forehead, are you stupid? Can you believe what Yesuhan said? Xiao Jinyan said, I was too anxious at the time. I was afraid that something would happen to you. Yesuhan is too bad. He actually lost your memory. How can Dad accept him as his apprentice? Feng Wu couldn't figure it out. Xiao Jinyan knew that Jun Mocking accepted Yesuhan as his apprentice because he chose him as his future son-in-law, so he taught him martial arts to protect Xiaoju. Feng Wu didn't understand and didn't think about it. He patted his arm, you go take a bath. I also want to take a bath and rest. I'm so sleepy. I received too much information today. Although I was happy and excited, many brain cells died and I needed sleep to recover. Speaking of bathing, Xiao Jinyan hadn't bathed with Xiaoju for a long time. He held her hand and said, let's bathe together. It can save time. Feng Wu and Xiao Jinyan had been sleeping in separate beds for a long time. They were both used to sleeping alone, so when they heard that he wanted to bathe together, they were a little confused. Are you not going back to the guest room to sleep? Dad already knows that we are husband and wife, so there is no need to separate. Xiao Jinyan said that he had already pulled her behind the screen, and his hands were not idle, and he began to undress her. Feng Wu looked at those 2 big hands and was not polite at all. After a while, only a belly band was left on her top, which was red and embroidered with peonies in yellow silk thread. Changzi said that she looked better in a red belly band, so most of her wardrobe was red. She thought she was already familiar with the speed of undressing Xiao Jinyan, and it was super fast. Now she found that Xiao Jinyan was not showing off, and he was fast once he took action. She raised her head and saw that he was seriously untying the belt behind his waist, and the posture seemed to hold her in his arms. Are you a little impatient? Really, Xiao Jinyan said, but his hands were not slow. After taking off her clothes, he picked her up and put her in the bathtub. The weather was cold, and Feng Guiu sat in the bathtub, surrounded by warm water, feeling very comfortable. She looked up at Xiao Jinyan standing next to the bathtub, untying his waist belt. He was obviously very impatient, but his movements were slow and there was a sense of abstinence. As his clothes were taken off one by one, his perfect figure was exposed. Why compromise? Who can resist such a beauty? Xiao Jinyan looked up and saw her beautiful starry eyes, staring at him without blinking. He raised the corners of his lips. Does it look good? Feng Guiu nodded in a very unpromising way. It looks good. Xiao Jinyan asked again, who looks good, me or your father? Feng Guiu said, both look good. Xiao Jinyan stepped into the bathtub and sat down opposite her. Because of the height difference, the water filled her chest but only reached his waist. Feng Guiu looked at his chest muscle lines, which were not exaggerated, just in line with her aesthetic taste as an art student. She reached out and touched it. It's very firm. Xiao Jinyan asked again, are you sure? Feng Guiu grinned, Jinyan looks the best. Xiao Jinyan then showed a satisfied smile and hugged her in his arms. Do you want to touch your abdominal muscles? Feng Guiu answered without hesitation, yes. How can you not touch a beautiful woman in your arms? Xiao Jinyan saw that she looked impatient and couldn't help laughing. Just as Feng Guiu was about to take action, a slightly hoarse voice came from above his head, do you like me as a person or my face? Feng Guiu said seriously, how can I be so superficial? Xiao Jinyan raised the corner of his lips, I think so too. Feng Guiu continued to say seriously, in addition to your face, of course I like your figure. A handsome face must have a perfect figure, neither of which can be missing. Xiao Jinyan. So, you still like his beauty? After taking a bath, Feng Guiu was carried to bed by Xiao Jinyan. She thought she could sleep comfortably, but she ended up sleeping comfortably. Xiao Jinyan was particularly energetic tonight. Feng Guiu was so sleepy that she woke up every time she was about to fall asleep, and this happened repeatedly. In the dead of night, Feng Guiu had already fallen asleep. Xiao Jinyan held her, and he was also a little tired after an in-depth exchange. These days, he has been separated from Xiaju, and he can't even sleep well. Tonight, he fell asleep almost immediately after holding Xiaju. 2 days later, Feng Guiu was looking forward to recovering her memory, so she got up early and made breakfast. As soon as she finished breakfast, Feng Guiu walked happily to the main hall, and saw Yanyu, who was wearing a gorgeous dress. Why is she here again? Feng Guiu planned to ignore Yanyu and walk straight to the main hall. Yanyu came here today to expose the true identity of the counterfeit. Seeing Feng Guiu pretending not to see her, she took a few quick steps to stop her. Where are you going? Feng Guiu looked at Yanyu standing in front of her. She looked like a little yellow duck in her goose yellow long sleeves. I'm going to find my father. Do you have anything to do? The state teacher has not come back yet. Do you think I don't know? Yanyu looked Feng Guiu up and down. You come with me to see my father. I must reveal your true identity today. Feng Guiu felt that Yanyu was really persistent. She was always persistent about her identity. She even came to pick her up at such an important time as breakfast. I'm very busy now and don't have time to see the emperor. You're not busy, but you don't dare, right? Weren't you very proud a few days ago? Why don't you dare now? Yanyu said and ordered, come here, arrest her and send her to the imperial study. As soon as Yanyu finished speaking, 2 guards came out from behind her. Feng Guiu looked at the tall guards walking towards her. She looked at Yanyu and saw that she had a smug expression. It was obvious that she was here for the reward. Just as the guards surrounded them, 2 strong winds suddenly hit them, sending them flying and crashing into the wall not far away. There were 2 loud bangs, and the guards vomited blood and fainted. Feng Wei looked at the two guards who had fainted with a confused look on her face. Could it be that it was her father who did it? Yanyu looked at her subordinates who fainted with vomiting blood in shock. She glanced around and saw no one. What's going on? Who did this? Before Yanyu finished her words, she was slapped several times in a row. Her originally fair cheeks were now red and swollen, and blood was flowing from the corners of her mouth. Feng Wei looked at Yanyu as if she was possessed by a demon. Her head was shaking violently from side to side, and her cheeks were getting redder and swollen. When she stopped, both cheeks were covered with slap marks, which clearly showed that she had been slapped. She looked around curiously. It was quiet in the morning, and there was not even a maid or eunuch. The only one who could hit someone from a distance was her father, right? Yanyu covered her face and looked around in horror, fearing that the invisible hand would attack again. Just then, a blue-white figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Feng Wei had seen Yesuhan's super-fast speed, and now she saw her father's speed again. It can be said that he arrived in front of her in the blink of an eye. She stepped forward and took her father's arm. "Dad." Yanyu saw the national master and showed an unbelievable look. She had clearly investigated that the national master had gone out and had not returned yet. How could he suddenly come back? Seeing Feng Wei holding the arm of the Grand Master, with a proud look on her face, sometimes she even wished that she was the Grand Master's daughter, enjoying the love that others could not enjoy. No wonder the fake was so arrogant, because the Grand Master was back. "Grand Master, she told me in person the day before yesterday that she was a fake Feng Wei. I hope the Grand Master can investigate it carefully. Good night. Please give me monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 597. After Yanyu finished speaking, she looked at Feng Wei again. Worrying about the presence of the Imperial Master, she restrained her tone and said, "Do you dare to swear that you never said that you were not Feng Wei?" Feng Wei blinked his beautiful big eyes twice and replied honestly, "I said it, but now I am indeed Feng Wei." Seeing that she had admitted it, Yanyu said proudly, "Master Imperial Master, you see, she admitted it herself, and now she says that she is Feng Wei. She clearly wants to deceive Master Imperial Master." June mocking glanced at Yanyu coldly. "As a princess, do you have a lot of free time every day? You always hold on to my daughter. What are your intentions?" Yanyu felt a chill running down her spine, and her eyes became clear. "Master Imperial Master, I'm just afraid that you will be deceived by her and delay your search for the real Princess Juyo." June mocking, "Do you think I am you? Are you so easy to deceive?" Yanyu hurriedly explained, "Master Imperial Master, that's not what I meant, I just..." June mocking said coldly, "It's not your turn as an outsider to make irresponsible remarks on my family affairs, so get out." How could Yanyu dare to say one more word? His legs were so frightened that he turned around and ran away. After seeing Yanyu leaving, Feng Wei smiled and looked at his father. "Dad, breakfast is ready, let's go eat together." June mocking nodded, "Yeah." On the dining table, most of the meals were made by Feng Wei, such as fried dough sticks, dumplings, pan-fried buns, etc., as well as preserved egg and lean meat porridge. Su Qingqing became very greedy when she saw fried dough sticks and dumplings. She hasn't eaten them since she left the palace. "It's been a long time since I had fried dough sticks." When Jun Wuxian heard this, he picked up a fried dough stick with his chopsticks and put it in the bowl in front of her, "Then eat more." Su Qingqing shyly picked up the fried dough sticks and took a bite. They were crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. It was the taste she had always been craving for. Jun Wuxian watched her eating, then picked up a fried dough stick and took a bite. It was completely different from the meals he had eaten before, and it tasted good. Feng Wei especially cooked some extra meals. Dad came from modern times, so he will definitely miss modern food. She picked up a fried dough stick and put it into the bowl in front of June, mocking, "Dad, you can eat it too." Yeah, June mocking lowered his eyes and looked at the porridge in front of him. He recognized it at a glance as preserved egg and lean meat porridge, as well as fried dough sticks and dumplings. He hadn't eaten them in many years, and he didn't expect to eat them again. It had been so long since he had eaten it that he almost forgot what the fried dough sticks tasted like. He picked up the fried dough sticks with his chopsticks and brought them to his mouth. He chewed them slowly, enjoying the taste in his memory. When Feng Guo saw June mocking eating it, he asked, "Dad, how does it taste?" June mocking praised it without hesitation, "It tastes good. Xiaoju's cooking skills are great." Feng Guo smiled when he heard this, "If you're not good at cooking, how can you satisfy your stomach?" Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaoju's actions and felt sad. Sure enough, after having a father, she forgot about him as a husband and didn't give him fried dough sticks. Jun Wuxian tasted a few meals and porridge, and they tasted very good. He smiled and looked at his sister, "I didn't expect Xiaoju to be such a good cook. Xiaoju used to be very lazy." Feng Guo shrugged helplessly, "There is nothing I can do to satisfy my appetite, but Chengzi can cook it, so I don't have to cook it myself." Su Qingqing suddenly remembered that every time she went to Hehuan Hall to have a meal, Xiaoju actually didn't cook, but Chengzi did the cooking. Chengzi learned all her cooking skills from Xiaoju. It seems that I also want the chef to learn cooking skills, so that I can eat Xiaojupe delicacies every day. Feng Guo said, "What's so difficult about this? I'll just come up with a recipe and let the cook follow it." Yes, Su Qingqing happily continued eating fried dough sticks. June mocking looked at the fried buns, picked one up and took a bite. It was a very authentic fried bun with thin skin, lots of fillings and tender meat. June mocking has never been so obsessed with eating. It's just that he has traveled to ancient times and hasn't eaten modern food for too long, so he will inevitably miss it. What's more, this is cooked by my daughter herself, so the meaning is even different. Therefore, every time Xiaoju cooks the food himself, he will eat more. After breakfast, the bowls and chopsticks were taken away by the maid, and then another maid came up with freshly brewed tea. June mocking picked up the teacup and took a few sips of tea. Some of the meals she had just eaten were oily, and drinking tea can remove the oil. Feng Guo was so full that he couldn't drink the tea, so he could only take a few sips. June mocking put down the teacup and turned to look at her daughter, "Xiaoju, come to the study with me." Feng Guo knew that her father was going to help her regain her memory, so she nodded happily, "Okay." She put down the teacup in her hand and followed June mocking obediently to the study. Xiao Jinyan also stood up and followed. Feng Guo saw Xiao Jinyan's figure and slowed down to wait for him. When he approached, he said, "Jinyan, why are you here?" Xiao Jinyan secretly held her hand and whispered, "I want to wait for you outside." Feng Guo is someone who has waited once, and it took a really long time. It takes a long time to restore memory. "You can come back in an hour." Xiao Jinyan said warmly, "It doesn't matter, I can do it." Okay. Feng Guo saw Shui Huai and suggested, "Let Shui Huai get you some food. It's too difficult to wait. You just had breakfast, are you going to eat again?" Xiao Jinyan smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about me, as long as you know, I'll be waiting for you outside." Yes. Feng Guo happily followed June mocking into the study. Without June mocking's reminder, Xiao Jinyan stood at the door without taking a step forward until the study door was closed. Shui Huai asked, "Do you need snacks and tea?" Xiao Jinyan said, "Tea is fine." Shui Huai turned and left after hearing that. When he came back, he had a cup of tea in his hand. He put it down and left. Xiao Jinyan looked at the closed study door and thought of the last time he recovered his memory. Xiaoju was guarding him at the door until he recovered his memory and went in to see him. This time he was the one guarding. While waiting, he was also looking forward to Xiaoju after his memory was restored. In the study, Feng Guiu stared at Jun mocking curiously, actually curious about how to recover his memory. Jun mocking turned around and saw his daughter's eyes staring at him. He said, "What are you looking at? Go lie on the couch." Oh, Feng Guiu bent down and took off her shoes neatly, then climbed onto the couch and lay down, staring at Jun mocking. "Dad, how do I recover my memory?" Jun mocking came over, sat down on the bed, lowered his eyes and looked at his daughter. "Just close your eyes." Feng Guiu still wanted to see how to recover her memory, but she needed to close her eyes. She closed her eyes obediently and waited quietly for her father's operation. As a result, he fell asleep while waiting. Outside the study, Xiao Jinyan stood tall at the door, with no impatience on his handsome face, but full of expectation. Just then, Yesuhan came over and saw Xiao Jinyan but not Xiaoju, so he asked, "Where is Xiaoju?" Xiao Jinyan looked over and saw Yesuhan wearing a silver mask, striding over. "She is in the study. What are you doing here?" Yesuhan looked at the closed study door. "My master is back." Xiao Jinyan said lightly, "Yeah." Yesuhan looked at Xiao Jinyan curiously. "What are you doing here?" Waiting for Xiaoju. Xiao Jinyan suddenly changed the subject. "Xiaoju will recover her memory soon." Yesuhan was stunned when he heard this. "Xiaoju is going to recover her memory? Won't she remember me?" "So what?" Xiao Jinyan looked at the closed study door. How sad would Xiaoju be if she knew that her former third brother did these things? Yesuhan was stunned again. Xiao Jinyan looked at Yesuhan. "Do you still want to wear the mask?" Yesuhan looked calm. "If Xiaoju wants to see it, let her see it. What if she knows? If Xiaoju hadn't sneaked out of the palace to see you off, how could he have been caught by the black-clothed man and waited for revenge?" When Xiao Jinyan returned to Daxia, he wanted to see Xiaoju, but he didn't have the chance. He was sent out of Data by the imperial guards of Nanzao Kingdom and handed over to the Daxia envoy. Xiaoju probably didn't find him, so she sneaked out of the palace to see him off after learning that he had left Datu. If he knew, he would rather not see that person than let Xiaoju encounter this. It's just too late to say anything now. The incident has already happened. Fortunately, after so much experience, they met. It's just that I'm not good at martial arts and I couldn't protect her. Yesuhan also felt guilty and blamed himself for not being strong enough, which made Xiaoju's life and death unknown and missing for so many years. If he was as powerful as his master, how could he watch Xiaoju get into trouble but be powerless? For a moment, both men were trapped in self-blame and guilt. When Jun Wuxian came over and saw Yesuhan wearing a mask, he didn't recognize him. He looked at the person in front of him in confusion. "Who is this?" Yesuhan saw Jun Wuxian, took 2 steps forward, and introduced himself. "Brother, it's me, Yesuhan." He called him brother together with Xiaoju. Jun Wuxian was a little surprised, and at the same time a little curious. "So it's the third prince, why are you wearing a mask? You've been missing for so long, I almost thought you." After Xiaoju disappeared, Yesuhan also disappeared, and everyone thought that the two of them had an accident together. Yesuhan's slender fingers touched the cold mask, smiled and said, "I'm used to it. When did you come back?" Jun Wuxian said, "I've been back for a few days." Yesuhan was a little surprised. "I just know now, how about drinking together tomorrow?" Jun Wuxian smiled and said, "I'm afraid it won't work, I'm going back to Daxia tomorrow." Hearing this, Yesuhan thought that Jun Wuxian had been staying in Daxia for so many years and settled down in Daxia. Go back to Daxia? In such a hurry? Jun Wuxian's smile deepened. "Because I'm getting married at the end of the year, I'm going back to prepare." I see. Yesuhan hurriedly congratulated. "Congratulations, big brother." Jun Wuxian, "Let's go to the wedding when we have time." Yesuhan, "Of course, no problem." Xiao Jinyan watched the two chatting like acquaintances, and suddenly thought of Xiaju, who used to talk and laugh with Yesuhan like this, and wait for her memory to recover. The three of them waited at the door of the study for a long time until the door was pushed open from the inside. The three big men came together. "Dad, how is Xiaju?" "Father, how is Xiaju?" "Master, has Xiaju recovered his memory?" Jun Mocking glanced at the three people in front of him. "Yes, but you can go in later." The three big men almost went in directly, but when they heard Jun Mocking's words, they hurriedly stopped and said in unison, "I know." Jun Mocking then walked out of the study. Shuihui took 2 steps forward. "Master, the hot water is ready." Yes. Jun Mocking strode towards the bedroom. In the study, Feng Wu slowly opened her eyes and stared at the beams on the roof for a long time. Memories poured into her mind like spring water, giving her a headache. She frowned and closed her eyes again, trying to ease the pain. But the headache did not ease, but continued. When Xiao Jinyan and others came in, they saw Xiaoju with a frown on her face. Xiao Jinyan rushed over immediately, sat down on the couch, and held the woman on the couch in his arms. "Xiaoju, what's wrong?" Feng Wu moved closer to Xiao Jinyan's arms, and uttered 2 words after a long while: "Headache." Xiao Jinyan reached out and rubbed her temples to relieve her headache. After a long while, when the pain eased, Feng Wu slowly opened her eyes and looked at Jun Wuxian and Yesuhan in front of her. The previous memories and the current memories kept circling and entangled in her mind. She suddenly realized that Xiao Jinyan looked like a fool when he recovered his memory that day, and she probably looked a bit like a fool now. Xiao Jinyan asked Xiao Jin in a gentle voice, "Do you remember?" Feng Wu retracted his gaze and looked at Xiao Jinyan, nodding, "I remember." Xiao Jinyan smiled happily, "That's good." Jun Wuxian also smiled, "Finally I remember. Xiaju, do you miss your elder brother?" Feng Wu looked at Jun Wuxian, who had matured a lot compared to 10 years ago. Thinking that he had never stopped looking for her all these years, she was very moved. "Of course I do." Yesuhan also looked at Xiaju excitedly, looking forward to it but also a little scared, afraid that she would ignore him. "Xiaju." Feng Wu knew that the man wearing a mask was Yesuhan, so when he saw him, he blurted out "third brother." Yesuhan hadn't heard Xiaju call him third brother for a long time. After many years, he heard it again, and his voice trembled with excitement. "Well, I am your third brother, and I have been looking forward to your return." Feng Wu was stunned for a moment. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Yesuhan, stood up and poured a cup of tea for Xiaju, just like she poured tea for him when she came in. When he just woke up, he would feel very thirsty. "Xiaju, drink some tea first." Ye Feng Wu felt thirsty, took the teacup from Xiao Jinyan and passed it to her lips and took a few sips to moisten her throat. After drinking the tea, she looked up and saw Yesuhan again. She remembered that Yesuhan didn't wear a mask when he was a child. "Third brother, come here." Yesuhan didn't like Xiaju calling him third brother at first, but later when he heard Xiaju calling Xiao Jinyan, "Jinyan brother," he wanted Xiaju to call him Suhan brother. But Xiaju was used to calling him third brother, no matter how he reminded her, it was useless, so he let her go. When he heard Xiaju calling him, he would involuntarily approach her. "What's wrong, Xiaju?" Feng Wu stared at the silver mask for a long time, still feeling it was annoying, reached out and grabbed the silver mask and pulled it off. New books can only be added to the bookshelf in advance if they are pre-ordered on this site. You cannot read them anywhere else. You can only read them after signing the contract. Good night. Please give me monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 598. Chapter 598. Kill Xiao Jinyan because of this? Daddy really doted on her so much that he cried. Feng Wu had long been curious about the face under the silver mask, but now that he had regained his memory, he also saw that he looked like the young man Yesuhan. So when Yesuhan approached, he reached out to pick off the silver mask without thinking. What she didn't expect was that the mask would be pulled off so smoothly. The moment the mask was pulled off, the study suddenly became quiet. Yesuhan didn't expect Xiaju to take off his mask directly. When his fair and handsome face was exposed to the air, he was stunned for a moment. There are still some differences between Xiaju and when he was a child. When he was a child, he would at least ask him, but when he grew up, he became smarter and started directly. But when Xiao Jinyan mentioned this matter just now, Yesuhan was already prepared. Although he was caught off guard, he quickly calmed down. Xiaoju wanted to see, why would he stop her? Even Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a while. Who would have thought that Xiaoju would take action on this matter just a moment ago? When Feng Wu saw Yesuhan's face, she found that it was a little more mature than 10 years ago, and her facial features were more three-dimensional and handsome. But did this face look familiar? She looked at him for a long time and came to the conclusion, "Third brother, you and little Master Wu Tan look alike." As she spoke, she raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. "Husband, do you look like him?" Although Xiao Jinyan saw the face under the silver mask for the first time, he already knew that he was Wu Tan. He looked at Xiaoju's confused expression and nodded, like. Yesuhan glanced at Xiao Jinyan, because he heard Xiao Jinyan mention Wu Tan, and looked at Xiao Joshi and smiled, "I don't know Wu Tan." Feng Wu kept staring at Yesuhan. They grew up together and she knew Yesuhan somewhat. Her temperament was nothing like Wu Tan's, but her face was exactly the same. The difference was that Yesuhan's face had a hint of coldness. But Wu Tan's face was somewhat cold and gentle. It's just that they look too much alike. Wu Tan is in Datu City. When you meet him, you will know that we look alike. A trace of curiosity flashed in Yesuhan's eyes. Really? Then I also want to meet him. Wu Tan lives in the inn. I've been so busy that I haven't seen him for many days. Feng Wu raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. Have you seen Wu Tan during this time? Xiao Jinyan has been paying attention to Yesuhan's expression. Whenever Xiaju mentioned Wu Tan, Yesuhan didn't show any panic or fear. He withdrew his gaze and looked at Xiaju. Wu Tan is no longer in the inn a long time ago. Then where did he go? Feng Wu thought that Wu Tan was from Nanzhao. Could it be that he had returned to his home? She looked at Yesuhan again and saw that the face looked really similar. Maybe it was because of the different personalities, so the eyes and expressions gave people different feelings. What Yesuhan wanted to do most now was to hold Xiaju in his arms and feel the joy of finding something lost, but he held back. Xiaju, it's all my fault. I didn't protect you well at that time. Feng Wu stared at Yesuhan for a long time. He was still the third brother in his memory, the one who had everything going smoothly. However, it was still sad to think of him attacking Xiao Jinyan again and again. Why do you want to kill my husband again and again? You were not like this before. It's because of him that something happened to you. If it weren't for him, you could live here carefree. You don't have to be separated from Master, and we won't be separated. It's all because of him. Yesuhan looked at Xiao Jinyan coldly. The moment something happened to Xiaoju, he wanted to kill Xiao Jinyan. What does my accident have to do with him? It's obvious that I disobeyed and had to sneak out, which allowed the bad guys to succeed. Third brother, why do you put all the blame on my husband? Husband, an icy chill flashed through Yesuhan's eyes. How many women are there in Xiao Jinyan's East Palace? He wants you to be his concubine. If Shen Shuwei's original body was not you, and if you didn't dress back, how many women would there be? Where is it worthy of you? Feng Wu was stunned for a moment, then explained, but he only has me as a woman. Yesu coldly smiled. If you weren't here, do you think he wouldn't marry another woman in order to consolidate his position as the crown prince? How did you end up in Xiaoxiang Pavilion in the first place? Feng Guiu was stunned when he heard this. Xiao Jinyan was very ambitious. If she hadn't passed through, Xiao Jinyan wouldn't have been able to resist the emperor all the time. He would have compromised for the sake of the position of the prince, right? Xiao Jinyan said one after another, to stabilize the position of the prince, you don't need to rely on women, but on strength. Yasuhan snorted, obviously not believing it. Feng Guiu didn't want the two of them to always be at war with each other, so he simply changed the subject. Third brother, where have you been these years? Yasuhan said, after you disappeared, I never returned to the palace and looked for you everywhere. Feng Guiu raised his head and looked at Jun Wuxian, big brother has been looking for me too. Jun Wuxian nodded, well, after you disappeared, your father left the capital city. I asked him and he didn't tell me, so I had to go looking for you everywhere. But it can be seen from my father's attitude that you just disappeared. That's all. When he mentioned his father, Feng Guiu raised the corner of his mouth with a look of admiration, Dad is the most powerful. She suddenly remembered something and glanced left and right. She was a little disappointed when she didn't see her handsome father. By the way, where's Dad? He wasn't even with me at such an important moment when I regained my memory. Jun Wuxian said, father should have gone to take a bath. Then I'll go find him after he finishes bathing. Feng Guiu has been separated from her father for so many years and really misses him so much. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, Jun Wuxian, and Yasuhan in front of her, sighing that time passed so quickly, and the young boy before had lost his tenderness and turned into a man. Finally, his eyes fell on Xiao Jinyan. He no longer looked like a 16-year-old boy, and his facial features were more handsome and calm than before. Feng Guiu stared for a long time, and Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but ask, what are you looking at? Feng Guiu frowned, I didn't see anything. Xiao Jinyan smiled and said, you have just recovered your memory. You should be very tired. Take a rest first. Wait a minute, I want to go see Daddy first, and then go to bed. Feng Guiu was excited at the moment. Even if she was tired, she wanted to go see Daddy first. She got out of bed, put on her shoes and walked out with brisk steps. Xiao Jinyan watched Xiaoju leave the study and looked at Yasuhan, who was also looking at him. Jun Wuxian saw that his sister had recovered her memory and planned to talk to Qing Qing. Only Xiao Jinyan and Yasuhan were left in the study. The two looked at each other, and Xiao Jinyan was the first to speak, you're pretending very well. Yasuhan's voice was a little cold, I don't understand what you are talking about. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Yasuhan, but he still had no reaction. Although he was confused, he didn't continue and walked out with doubts. Yasuleng also walked out with a stern face. At this time, in the dormitory, Feng Guiu came all the way to the dormitory. Although they had been away for 10 years, the place where they lived since childhood was still very familiar. She came to her father's bedroom in a familiar way. Seeing that the door was open, she held her hand on the door frame and glanced inside. She saw a slender figure standing in front of the desk. She wore a blue and white long-sleeved gown, which was her father's favorite. Wear color. Dad. Feng Guiu walked in with cheerful steps. Jun Mocking raised his head and saw his daughter walking over with a smile on her face, I just regained my memory, why don't you have a good rest? I'm here to see Daddy. Feng Guiu smiled and walked to Jun Mocking. He curiously looked at the two paintings in front of him and found that they were both painted by her. One was drawn by her recently with a sketch, and the other was drawn when she was 8 years old, using a pencil given to her by her father, who was also a birthday present. She raised her head and looked at her father with a smile, Dad, do you still keep this painting? Jun Mocking said, of course, I have to keep the gift from my daughter. Feng Guiu recalled many things from her childhood. Her father had never been angry with her. No matter what she did or what trouble she got into, He always spoke to her with a good temper. When she loses her temper, her father will coax her and meet all her demands. She likes to eat with her hands. When she sees her father, she will use the hand that just took the cake to tug his sleeve. When she cries, she will hug his thigh, causing snot and tears to rub everywhere. Daddy, who always loves cleanliness, never resents her soiling his clothes. For as long as she can remember, her father has been alone, coaxing her to sleep, telling her stories, and giving her all kinds of delicious food. The disadvantage is that her father doesn't know how to cook and often talks about delicious food but cannot eat it, which often makes her so greedy that she can't sleep. She reached out and hugged her father. Daddy, I have grown up. June mocking looked at his daughter. No matter how many times he looked at her, no matter how old she was still a child in his eyes. Well, I have indeed grown up and become more sensible than before. Feng Guiu smiled and said, I can take care of Daddy. June mocking said, it sounds like I'm old. Feng Guiu praised without hesitation, Daddy is as young and handsome as ever. From now on, whatever Daddy wants to eat, I will make it for you. You don't have to rely on your brain to think about it. Hearing this, June mocking thought of Xiaju when he was a child. He often talked about some modern delicious food, but she said she was greedy. She looked at him eagerly and said, Dad, I want to eat. Daddy doesn't know how to cook. Just imagine. They say that daughters are carrying little cotton-padded jackets, and this sentence is not true at all. Feng Guiu chuckled twice, Dad, have you missed me after so many years of separation? June mocking lowered his eyes and looked at his daughter. After recovering his memory, Hu became closer to him. My precious daughter is in another time and space, so she naturally thinks about it. Feng Guiu sighed, it's a pity that my father and I have been separated for so many years and I don't even remember him. I always thought that I was an orphan. June mocking comforted him, it's okay if you don't remember, otherwise it will be even more sad if you miss someone but can't see them. Feng Guiu said, but it's not a good feeling to be an orphan. If I remember my father, I won't have to envy others, because my father is young, handsome, and super powerful. June mocking thought of how Xiaoju was like this when she was a child. No matter how good other people's parents were, she would still show off her father with her chin raised and arrogant expression on her face. She would put her arms around his neck and say in a sweet voice, having daddy means owning the whole world. Xiaoju is very smart and can draw inferences from one instance to another. This sentence comes from him, having Xiaoju means that daddy has all the time. When he feels wronged, he will hug his legs like a koala and say, Daddy, the bear biscuits in the nest, were bitten by fish. After asking more about it, he found out that she was lying on the fence eating biscuits and fell into the water and was eaten by the fish. Bear biscuits are a modern snack. They have been kept in the space and are not willing to eat them. When she is happy, she will tug on his sleeves and jump up and down behind him, saying in a soft and waxy voice, Daddy, the nest is as good as the candy. After eating, she would stretch out her fleshy little hands towards him and say, Daddy, Daddy, I still want the nest. June mocking deliberately scared his daughter, eat too much and you'll have worms in your teeth. Xiaoju would immediately open her mouth wide, Daddy, Daddy, hurry up and catch the worms. Countless scenes of his daughter's childhood flashed through June mocking's mind. After so many years of separation, he seemed calm, but in fact he was more anxious than anyone else and missed Xiaoju more than anyone else. However, some things he couldn't change. All he could do was wait and miss her. But his daughter was only 10 years old and had to face the unfamiliar time independently. She turned from a spoiled little princess into an orphan. When she saw other people's parents, she didn't even show off. June mocking listened to his daughter's choked voice, tears flashing in her beautiful starry eyes. He rubbed his daughter's head distressedly, it's good that you're back. We won't be separated in the future. Feng Guiu nodded vigorously, well, I will never be separated from daddy again. June mocking gently patted his daughter's back, as if he had returned to her childhood. At that time, she was only 3 years old. When she woke up, she didn't see him and cried out of breath, feeling very wronged. When he heard the sound and returned to the room, Xiaoju saw him and immediately reached out for a hug. After he picked her up, Xiaoju was still sobbing in grievance, as if she had been bullied. Tomorrow, we will go to Daxia. You haven't seen Dao Tao and Susu for so long, and you miss them very much. Feng Guo secretly wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. It's been a long time since we last saw them. Dad will definitely like them when he sees them. June mocking said, of course, my daughter's children, how can I not like them? Feng Guo smiled when he heard it, that's right. June mocking looked at his daughter and still lamented that his daughter got married too early. You and Xiao Jinyan are already married and have children, and it's useless for me to object. However, if he dares to bully you, you don't have to endure it, just divorce directly, and don't leave any of the 2 children to him. I will help you raise them. June mocking's words were to tell his daughter that he was the strongest backing behind her and she didn't have to be afraid of anything. Feng Guo couldn't help laughing, I know, Daddy. At night, Feng Guo didn't have much to pack. She put all the things she brought into the space. She was lying on the bed waiting for Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan came out of the bath and saw Xiaoju lying on the bed. He walked over. After getting on the bed, he lay down beside Xiaoju. Too many things happened during this period, but it was also worth being happy. He hugged her in his arms with some excitement. He would return to Daxia tomorrow, so he would do nothing tonight and rest well. Feng Guo raised her head from his arms. I suddenly understand why you said that night. Good night. Seeking monthly tickets. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 599. After hearing this, Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her with curiosity in his eyes. What do you understand? Feng Guo snorted, you said that because you offended me after I regained my memory. Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but laugh, well, I guessed half of it right. Feng Guo thought Xiao Jinyan would feel guilty or nervous, but she saw him smiling. Dare you laugh? Xiao Jinyan looked at her seriously, I was afraid of being lost and disappointed. I thought that what happened in my childhood was insignificant and could be discarded. I couldn't let go because the memories that belonged to us when we were children were so important. So important that I can't let go of it. Wouldn't you be disappointed now if I just said it to coax you to let it go? Feng Guo pouted, whatever you say makes sense, but I would really be sad if I knew you didn't care about what happened when you were a child. Xiao Jinyan held her in his arms again, recalling everything in the past, and still felt lucky. This arrangement of fate shows that we are destined. Even if we are separated for 10 years, we will still meet again. Even if we don't remember, we will still cherish each other. Feng Guo agreed, it's quite fate. I became your concubine as soon as I got here. I didn't even have to go through the process of falling in love and talking about marriage. Xiao Jinyan smiled, knowing what she meant about falling in love, so he comforted her, it's the same with falling in love after marriage. Things have already happened, what can Feng Guo say? But the beginning is not important, what is important is the result. She yawned, sleepy. Xiao Jinyan said warmly, go to sleep, we will leave for Daxia tomorrow. Ye Feng Guo closed his eyes and muttered, but it will take a long time before we can see Dao Tao and Susu. After hearing this, Xiao Jinyan patted her back soothingly. Xiaoju could have stayed with his son and daughter every day because he was so far away from the palace. And because of his persistence, I accompanied him to Nanzao country without hesitation. Fortunately, I gained something. Xiao Jinyan fell asleep holding Xiaju in her arms, and she slept extremely deeply. Early the next morning, when Feng Wu was having breakfast, Yesuhan came. Xiaju. Feng Wu was still eating her meal. When she saw Yesuhan, she called out, "Third brother." Yesuhan stood in front of Xiaju, looking at her with food still in her mouth and her cheeks bulging. "I heard that you are going back to Daxia." "Well, I've been out for too long, and I miss the babies." When it came to the baby, Feng Wu remembered telling Yesuhan about the baby. "Third brother, I have a pair of twins, a boy and a girl, who are already over 2 years old. If you have time, you can go to Daxia to see them." "Okay, then I will go to Daxia with you," Yesuhan said and looked at Xiao Jinyan with a smile on his lips. "Isn't it that the crown prince of Daxia doesn't welcome you?" Xiao Jinyan has never seen such a shameless person, and he still wants to follow him to Daxia? "Of course you're welcome." Xiao Jinyan gritted his teeth and spit out 4 words. The smile in Yesuhan's eyes got even bigger. When no one was around, Feng Wu asked, "Third brother, were you saying angry words before?" Yesuhan asked in confusion, "What are you talking about?" Feng Wu said, "That's right, when you said you wanted me to marry you, was it because I didn't remember you and you were angry?" Yesuhan didn't answer and asked instead, "Why do you think I said this out of anger instead of the truth? But don't we feel like brothers and sisters? You are like my brother." Feng Wu has always regarded Yesuhan as her brother, so unlike other princes, she has a very good relationship with Yesuhan, because the eldest brother does not. He is always around, so she spends more time with Yesuhan. Yesuhan said, "But what I told you is true. I have never treated you as a sister, but as a future wife. Master also said that as long as I work hard, I can marry you. Besides, I'm not angry. I'm happy to have you back." Feng Wu was stunned when he heard this. No wonder Yesuhan always said that when he was a child, he wanted her to be his crown princess, give her delicious food, and said that he would raise her to be fat. She said, "I can't carry it anymore when I gain weight." Yesuhan said, "No matter how fat you are, you can still carry it on your back." She was raised like a glutinous rice dumpling when she was a child, with a chubby face and a heavier weight than the average little girl. No one said she was fat except Ye Enyu, who said she was fat. Yesuhan said again, "When you were 5 years old, didn't I say that I wanted you to be my crown princess? And you nodded in agreement." Feng Wu felt a little speechless. Who says this to a 5-year-old child? "I was thinking about food at that time and thought you were coaxing me, so I nodded. Besides, what didn't you say when you coaxed me?" Yesuhan replied seriously, "But everything I said was serious." Feng Wu. Yesuhan couldn't help but ask again, "Am I not good looking?" Feng Wu nodded, "It looks good." Yesuhan asked, "Then why don't you like me?" Feng Wu said, "I like third brother. There are so many princes, but I only like third brother. It's just different from liking Xiao Jinyan. Third brother, do you understand? There are 13 princes under Yehaoding. Xiaju only calls him third brother, but the other princes do not get this treatment. Xiaoju was only close to him, and he was the only one who had turned his back on Xiaoju." Yesuhan snorted, "I don't want to understand." Feng Wu. After packing up, Feng Wu hugged Xuetuan. When she saw Kiu and Tigress, she took Kiu with her. It's just that the Tigan is too big to carry. Looking at the tiger lion beast's big copper bell eyes staring at her, he must have guessed that she was leaving. Feng Wu rubbed the tiger lion beast's huge head. "I'm leaving Wu Palace and returning to Daxia. I don't want to leave you in Wu Palace, but you." She looked the tiger lion beast up and down. "It's too big, it's not easy to carry." "Oh," the tiger lion beast howled a little aggrieved. After being separated for so long, they have to separate again. Even if the tiger-lion beast is a wild beast, it is reluctant to leave. June Mocking walked over and stood beside his daughter, saying softly, "Xiaju, what's wrong?" "Daddy, I can't bear to leave the tiger-lion beast here." Feng Wu knew that it would be difficult to meet again after this separation. Nanzao Kingdom and Daxia are thousands of miles apart, and it's not easy to come and go. June Mocking said calmly, "This is simple." Feng Wu almost thought she had heard it wrong. "Daddy, this is still simple? I'm going to separate from the tiger-lion beast." She retracted her gaze and looked at the tiger-lion beast. When she picked it up, it was so small, and she really couldn't bear to leave it. At this moment, something strange happened. Feng Wu looked at the tiger-lion beast in front of her and it suddenly disappeared. She rubbed her eyes. Such a big tiger-lion beast disappeared? She was stunned for a long time, and suddenly thought of her father. She turned her head and looked at her father. "Dad, didn't you take the tiger-lion beast?" June Mocking said lightly, "Well, put it in the space." Feng Wu was shocked. "Can the space still hold living things?" June Mocking asked back, "Why not? I always thought that living things can't be put in." Feng Wu felt so stupid for the first time that she didn't know the function of the space, otherwise she would have taken some chickens and ducks out of the chicken coop. June Mocking comforted, "It's not too late to know now." "It's not too late, but it's a bit of a loss that it hasn't been used for so many years." Feng Wu almost beat his chest and stamped his feet, and he didn't know more about the functions of the space. June Mocking said, "Okay, it's time to set off." Feng Wu nodded. The group took a carriage and left the capital city. In the carriage, Feng Wu looked at Sichuan in her arms. No wonder Sichuan came to her when she first came here. It turned out to be her pet. "I heard from my father that a pet like Sichuan is rare in a century. No wonder it is so smart." She smiled, and suddenly felt something was wrong. She turned her head and looked at her father. "Dad, is the tiger-lion beast a pet?" June Mocking nodded, "Yes." Feng Wu felt that she was fooled by her father. "Didn't you say that a pet is rare in a century?" "I met two at once." June Mocking said confidently, "It's true that it's rare in a century, but you are lucky to meet them." Feng Wu: "Why do I feel that my father's words are a bit unreliable?" In the Great Xia Palace. After Xiao Jinyu came back from Mobei, he found that his wife had lost a lot of weight and felt distressed for a long time. "Didn't I tell you to go to your sister-in-law's chicken coop and catch some chickens to stew? Look how thin you are. You don't have much meat when you touch it," Xiao Jinyu said as he put his hand on her waist and pinched it. There was not much meat, and he felt so distressed. Miss Han felt a little itchy when she was touched, so she grabbed Xiao Jinyu's hand and stopped him from touching her. "Don't touch me." Xiao Jinyu hugged her into his arms, and his hands were not honest. "What's wrong with me touching you? We've been apart for so long, why don't you let me touch you?" Miss Han's face was a little red. "It's daytime now." "What's wrong with daytime?" Xiao Jinyu lowered his head and kissed Miss Han's face, but felt that it was not enough, so he kissed her little mouth. "After being apart for so long, it was okay to be busy killing enemies during the day, but I missed my wife so much at night that I couldn't sleep." Miss Han was panting. "Jinyu, stop it." Xiao Jinyu missed his wife so much that he wanted to get closer to his wife when he just came back. Seeing that her face was a little bad, he felt even more distressed. "Okay, I won't bother you anymore. I'll go to the chicken coop and get an old hen to feed you." Miss Han nodded, "Okay." Xiao Jinyu was reluctant to let go of his wife. "Do you want to go over and take a look? Isn't it uncomfortable to stay in the house all day?" When Xiao Jinyu was not around, Miss Han stayed in the house or watered the flowers at the door. Now that Xiao Jinyu was back, it would be nice to go out with him. "Then let's go over and take a look." "Okay, I'll put on your shoes too." Xiao Jinyu stood up and squatted in front of her, holding her feet with one hand and picking up the embroidered shoes on the pedal with the other hand, and put them on her steadily. Miss Han looked down at Xiao Jinyu's actions. Who would have thought that a dandy prince would be so attentive? These years of getting along also let her know that Xiao Jinyu looked unreliable, but in fact he was more reliable than anyone else. Xiao Jinyu stood up and held her hand. Okay, let's go. Yes. Miss Han followed Xiao Jinyu out of the house. When they passed the front yard, Wang Xin came back from outside and bumped into them. Wang Xin walked over with a gentle smile on her lips. Prince, where are you going? Xiao Jinyan said, I will take her to the chicken coop to take a look. She has lost a lot of weight. I plan to catch a chicken to nourish her. Wang Xin looked at Miss Han. She was indeed thinner. She didn't understand why the prince liked Miss Han. She looked thin, and her figure was not as delicate as a woman's. Prince, I want to go and take a look too. You'd better not go. I can go with her, Xiao Jinyu said, and he took his wife's hand and walked out in front of Wang Xin. Miss Han glanced at Wang Xin indifferently, and didn't take her to heart. She knew better than anyone how straightforward Xiao Jinyu was. Wang Xin stood there in a daze, watching Xiao Jinyu lead Miss Han out like this, and couldn't help but clench the handkerchief in her hand. Miss Han is your concubine, and I am also your concubine. Why can't we be treated equally? The more Wang Xin thought about it, the more unwilling she felt. She thought that choosing a man like Xiao Jinyu should be a good destination. As a result, after thousands of choices, she still chose a man who didn't care about her. How could she not be better than Miss Han? Xiao Jinyu naturally didn't hear what Wang Xin said. Xiao Jinyu didn't regard Wang Xin as his woman at all, and was planning to find an opportunity to send her away so as not to disturb him and his wife. Xiun Pavilion was a bit far away, and Xiao Jinyu was afraid that Miss Han would be tired, so he asked, Are you tired? Do you want me to carry you? Someone was willing to carry you, and Miss Han was too lazy to walk, which was just what she wanted. Okay. Xiao Jinyu happily let go of her, bent down and stretched out his arms to hold her in his arms. It was not difficult to hold her before, and it was even easier to hold her now. No wonder you are thinner. It is much easier to hold you than before. I must make you fatter. Miss Han asked curiously, Why? Xiao Jinyu grinned, You are plump and comfortable to touch. Miss Han. When they arrived at Xiun Pavilion, Xiao Gaiza came up with a smile. Why is Prince Yu here? Xiao Jinyu said, I'll catch a chicken for my wife. Xiao Gaiza nodded immediately and said, I'll catch one for you. I'll pick one myself. Xiao Jinyu wanted to pick a big and fat one. Xiao Gaiza didn't dare to say no, so she let Prince Yu go. The chicken coop has been expanded and is more than twice as big as before. After Xiao Jinyu put his wife down, he said, You just wait here, I'll go pick one. Miss Han nodded, Okay. Xiao Jinyu came to the chicken coop, glanced at the chickens inside, and picked the fattest one. Asterisk. Guo Guo and Xiao Guo Guo were in class, and no one was playing with Susu, so she lay on the bai and went out for a walk. Susu had come out countless times. With De Bai by her side, she was the only one who could bully others, and no one could bully her, so Chan 11 relaxed her supervision. Chan 11 would mention the prince and the princess in front of Tao Tao and Susu every day, because they had been away from the palace for too long, and they were afraid that the two little families would forget their father and mother. Chan 11 mentioned it again today. Susu hadn't seen her mother for a long time, and she was thinking about her very much at the moment. She patted De Bai's neck, Hoo, let's go find her mother. Good night. The new book has been written for 3,000 words, and it's too hard to publish it. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 601. Dabai didn't know where the crown princess was, but the palace was already very familiar with her, and she would carry Susu out for a walk almost every day. Not knowing where the princess was, Dabai wandered around the palace with Susu on his back. Although Dabai and Susu often go out for a walk, the guards and maids still stay away when they see them, for fear that Dabai will suddenly go crazy out of control. Her big black eyes looked around, and after searching for a while, she didn't see Mama's figure. Her pink and tender face was full of worry. Where did Mom go? Huaixiang saw Dabai and Susu from a distance and reminded Chang Liangyuan, Master, isn't that the princess? Chang Liangyuan looked in the direction of Huaixiang's finger and saw Susu and the tiger. She hadn't seen them for a while, and the tiger was much stronger. There is also Susu, which becomes cuter as it grows. When Chang Liangyuan discovered this, she became very angry. Xiao Jinyan found it a long time ago, but he didn't come back for so long and didn't know what he was doing outside. She touched her belly and wondered when she would be able to conceive a child. Her and Xiao Jinyan's child would definitely be smarter and cuter than Dao Tao and Susu. Chang Liangyuan stared at Susu for a long time, and was a little hesitant when she saw the tiger. Every time she wanted to get closer, she was put off by the white tiger. Seeing that Susu was about to leave, she boldly stepped forward and greeted with a smile, Susu, where are you going? Although Susu is young, she has a good memory. When she sees Chang Liangyuan in front of her, she recognizes her that she often sees at Grandma Wang's place. I'm going to find Mommy. Looking for Mom? Chang Liangyuan heard it from her aunt, which means mother-in-law. Susu is going to find Shen Shuwei. Chang Liangyuan continued to ask, do you know where your mom is? Susu shook her head, I don't know, does I know where Wo Mama is? Chang Liangyuan glanced at Bai Hu, and her heart trembled with fear when she saw the fierce look in his eyes. I'll tell you as soon as you get off it. Susu lowered her head and glanced at Dabai. She hugged Dabai's neck with two jade lotus-like arms and said in a sweet voice, Hu, get down. Dabai raised his head and glanced at Chang Liangyuan warily. He hesitated for a while before slowly lying down with his legs bent. After Dabai lay down, Susu hugged Dabai's neck, kicked off her legs and slid off him neatly. After waiting down, Susu walked several steps towards Chang Liangyuan, raised her little face and looked at Chang Liangyuan, where is Wo Mama? After Susu took a few steps, Dabai followed Susu and took a few steps. When Chang Liangyuan saw Dabai coming over, she instinctively took 2 steps back. There was nothing she could do about it, this white tiger was really ferocious. When she looked at Susu, she pointed at Bai Hu and coaxed, you make him take a few steps back, or I won't tell you. Susu looked back at Dabai in confusion, and then at Chang Liangyuan. In order to know where Mama was, she turned around and came to Dabai, rubbed its huge head, and pointed to the big tree not far away. Hu, where are you going to wait? Dabai raised his huge head and stared at Susu for a while. Finally, he stood up obediently and walked towards the tree. He took 3 steps and turned around. He was obviously a ferocious beast, but he looked like an angry little daughter-in-law. Chang Liangyuan had always heard that Bai Hu listened to Susu's words, but she couldn't believe it when she saw Bai Hu walking obediently to the tree with her own eyes. Susu didn't see Dabai's aggrieved look. She ran up to Chang Liangyuan with her short legs and asked, where is Wo Mama? Chang Liangyuan became a lot more courageous now. Children are easier to deceive. She just said a word and let Dabai leave. She knelt down in front of Susu and whispered, your mom is outside the palace, but you can't be found in the palace. Susu tilted her head, her pink and tender face full of confusion, where is outside the palace? Chang Liangyuan raised her head, pointed to the wall in front of her, and said to Susu, from here, you can go out by climbing a few walls. Susu raised her head and looked in the direction of Chang Liangyuan's finger. At just over 2 years old, she couldn't understand the meaning of Chang Liangyuan's words. Chang Liangyuan saw Susu tilting her head and staring at the wall, thinking that even if she understood it at such a young age, she wouldn't know how to get out. She rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "If you find someone to take you out of the palace, you can leave the palace to find mommy." As if Susu understood, she turned around and ran towards Dabai. Dabai was still aggrieved at first, but when he saw Susu running over, he immediately went to greet her. Chang Liangyuan stood up and watched Susu climb onto the white tiger and then leave. She raised the corners of her lips and said it was best to leave the palace. It would be difficult to investigate if something happened. Susu returned to Hehuan Hall, saw Chu Lingfeng, and threw herself into his arms. "Little pot pot, little pot pot." This was the first time Chu Lingfeng saw Susu in such a hurry, and there was a trickle of sweat on his forehead. "What's wrong, Susu?" Susu grabbed Chu Lingfeng's hand and walked to the corner. "Let's go out of the palace to find mommy." Chu Lingfeng had stayed in the Hehuan palace for so long, but she still knew what mama meant. She just left the palace. How did she know? "Susu, we can't leave the palace now." Susu was so anxious that she almost cried. "I'm leaving the palace and looking for mommy." When Chu Lingfeng saw Susu crying, he immediately panicked. He took out the square handkerchief from his arms and wiped the tears from the corners of Susu's eyes while saying, "The Crown Princess went to see His Highness the Crown Prince and they will be back soon. We will wait here for them to come back, okay?" Susu, who has always been obedient, showed her temper for the first time. "If you don't want me, I'll find mommy." Chu Lingfeng is only 10 years old, how can he take Susu out of the palace? Just watching Susu crying and looking for her mom, she couldn't help but feel anxious. Changzi ran out when she heard the crying and saw Susu crying. She thought Susu was wronged. She walked to Susu and hugged her in her arms, coaxing her and asking, "Susu, who bullied you?" Chu Lingfeng said, "Susu wants to leave the palace to find the crown princess." Changzi listened and continued to coax Susu, who was still crying. "Susu, be good, the crown princess will be back soon, I will get you a lollipop, okay?" Susu, who was still crying, stopped crying immediately when she heard the lollipop, raised 2 fingers, and said in a baby voice, "I want 2 lollipops this time." Changzi couldn't help laughing when she heard it. "Okay, eat 2 lollipops." The method of making lollipops was still taught to her by the crown princess, but the lollipops for Susu contain more milk and relatively less sugar. The purpose is to prevent Susu from being greedy and damaging her teeth. After Changzi gave Susu 2 lollipops, Susu took one in each hand and sat there eating the lollipops obediently. Chu Lingfeng saw Susu eating the lollipops with tears in the corners of her eyes, looking very cute. Changzi sighed, not knowing when the master would come back. How long had she been gone? Susu fell asleep after eating the lollipops, still holding a lollipop tightly in her hand, saying that she would leave it for her mother. Changzi's heart melted when she heard it. How could there be such a cute and sensible Susu? "Masters, please come back soon," not to mention that Susu misses her mother, she also misses the masters. Changzi thought that Susu would sleep and forget the idea of leaving the palace to find the masters when she woke up tomorrow, but as soon as she woke up, she hugged her neck and mumbled in a baby voice, "I'll go find my mom. I'll go out of the palace to find my mom." Changzi had no choice but to use his trump card. "Susu, let's have breakfast first, okay? There are meat buns, fried dough sticks, shrimp dumplings." Susu almost drooled when she heard this, and raised 2 little fingers. "I want to." After thinking for a while, she raised 3 fingers again. 3, eat a full stomach, so you have the strength to find your mom." Changzi couldn't help laughing and felt a little distressed. "Okay, Susu, eat a full stomach, so you have the strength." The dining table was full of meals and millet porridge. The first thing Susu did after sitting down was to pick up a meat bun and turned her head to look at Dabai next to the chair. Who, a bun. Dabai waited for this moment every morning. It raised its head and opened its mouth, waiting for Susu to feed it. Susu happily threw the meat bun into Dabai's mouth, and watched Dabai eat it before she picked up the meat bun and brought it to her mouth to take a bite. This scene appears every day at breakfast time, and Dao Tao and Chu Ling are used to it. During meals, Susu completely inherited Feng Wu's advantages. She never needed to be coaxed. She would eat obediently and eat a lot. After breakfast, Susu took the meat buns and stuffed them into her small bag. While stuffing them, she said in a baby voice, "Kuakuo, I'm going to find Mamala." Dao Tao hadn't seen her father and mother for a long time. She only heard Chengzi talking about them every day. Now she heard her sister say that she was going to find her mother, and she showed an excited expression. "Where are we going to find my mother?" Outside the palace, Susu packed 3 meat buns, and her small bag couldn't hold them. She patted the small bag and got off the chair neatly. Dao Tao also got off the chair neatly after hearing this. She ran to her sister with her 2 short legs and held her sister's hand. "I'm going with my sister to find my mother." Susu was so happy when she heard Kuakuo was going to go with her to find her mother. She patted her small bag, her 2 beautiful eyes curved into crescents. "Find mom and give her a bag." Chengzi, who was not far away, watched the 2 young masters walk out hand in hand. It was no wonder that she mentioned the prince and the princess in front of them every day. Susu still remembered that the master loved to eat meat buns. Chu Lingfeng followed them slowly. At the same time, Dabai also walked beside Susu with his strong limbs. Dao Tao and Susu had only left the palace once. After Feng walked out of the Hehuan palace, she didn't know which way to go out of the palace. Susu looked at the 2 roads in front of her, and she didn't know which one to go. She turned her head and asked Dao Tao, "Kuakuo, which way are we going?" Dao Tao thought for a while and said to her sister, "Let's go find Grandpa Huang." Susu nodded happily, "Okay." The 2 little guys walked hand in hand towards the imperial study. They had been there countless times and had memorized the route. When they arrived, they saw a group of ministers walking out of the imperial study, and their faces were not very good. Seeing Dao Tao and Susu, the ministers greeted them one by one before leaving. Susu lay on the door frame and looked inside. Dao Tao stood on tiptoe and looked inside. Dabai stood behind the 2 little guys as usual, using its huge head to support the 2 black heads and looking inside. Chu Lingfeng had no emperor to summon her, so she could only wait from a distance. Every time she came to the imperial study, she would check in advance to make sure that the emperor was not busy before they went in. The prince had not returned for too long, and there were many different opinions in the court and the public. The emperor frowned, and received news a long time ago that the prince had lost his memory when he was found. The prince and the princess then rushed to Nanzhao kingdom one after another, and it was unknown what they were doing specifically. After Yuer came back, he asked again, but still got nothing. The prince has not returned since he disappeared, which inevitably makes people suspicious. He picked up the teacup on his right hand and was about to take a sip when he saw 3 heads lying on the doorframe, 2 black heads and 1 big white head. I have seen this scene countless times. Every time I see it, I can't help but curl my lips and my mood will get better. The emperor waved to the 2 little guys, Dao Tao and Susu, "Come here. Grandpa Emperor. Grandpa Emperor." Dao Tao and Susu crossed the threshold with their short legs one after another, and then the emperor ran over. Dabai lay at the door, raised his huge head and stared at Susu. The emperor looked at the 2 little guys on the left and right, and said with a smile, "Dao Tao and Susu, let me hug you and see if you have gained weight." Dao Tao and Susu spread their arms, waiting for the emperor to hug them. "Grandpa Emperor, hold them." The emperor picked them up one by one and sat them on his lap. It was obvious that Susu was heavier, and the rice snacks he ate more than Dao Tao every day were not eaten in vain. Susu didn't forget the business. She held the emperor's jade pendant with her two little hands and said in a baby voice, "Grandpa, I'm going to find my mom." The emperor smiled and asked, "Where do you want to find your mom?" Dao Tao said, "Grandpa, we're going to look for her outside the palace." It was the first time the emperor heard him say that he was going outside the palace, and he couldn't help but be curious. "The outside of the palace is so big, do you know where your mom is?" Susu's voice was soft and sweet, "Grandpa, you take us to find her." The emperor laughed when he heard this and found that Susu was really smart, "But Grandpa is very busy every day and has no time to take you out to find your mom." Susu thought for a while, opened her small bag, took out a meat bun from it and handed it to the emperor. "Grandpa, this is a bun." The emperor watched Susu take out the meat bun from the small bag with his own eyes, and took a bite with Susu's hand. Although the bun was cold, it tasted good. Susu saw that the emperor had eaten, and she reminded him, "Mom also likes this bag." She patted her small shoulder bag, "Give it to Mom." The emperor looked down at Susu's small shoulder bag. The small shoulder bag was bulging, and you could see the meat buns inside. He suddenly understood that Susu originally wanted to find the crown princess, and the meat buns were also for the crown princess. She gave them to him to eat to bribe him to take them to find the crown princess. Dao Tao tugged at the emperor's sleeve and said in the same baby voice, "Grandpa, take us to find Mom, okay?" Susu said, "Grandpa, I miss Mom." The emperor looked down at the two little guys, and he couldn't bear to refuse Susu. After a moment of silence, he smiled and agreed. "Okay, I'll take you out to find it. Good night. Please vote for the monthly ticket and recommendation ticket."